Chapter 2032. What are you thinking about? Fire Lotus didn't understand, but she didn't ask. Seeing Qin Feiyang remain silent, the others were also suspicious. For billion, divine, crystals, this amount of soul stones was enough for everyone around him to step into the half-step divine lord realm. It could even create a few beginner divine lords. As for the pinnacle grade deity arts and deity weapons, they could instantly increase their strength by several times. But after spending so much effort to get this evidence, he was unwilling to let Feng Wenhai go just like that. Moreover, leaving Feng Wenhai alive was also a disaster. On one side was a disaster, and on the other side was wealth. This made it difficult for Qin Feiyang to choose, because what he lacked now was soul stones, and Feng Zihan was also smart. He just happened to grasp this need of his. You have to think carefully. Even if you kill my father today, it will be difficult for you to survive in the Nine Heavens Palace. After all, my grandfather is the Hall Master of the Resource Palace, and I am also the #1 on the Heaven list. My mother is also a law enforcement elder. You are a smart person. If you really want to fight to the death with us, the one who will suffer in the end will definitely be you. So using Guyong's death to end this matter is undoubtedly the best ending. And I promise that we will never find trouble with you again, and we can even be your backing. Feng Zihan transmitted. Fight to the death? Suffer? Backing? Qin Feiyang was stunned, and secretly asked, Are you threatening me? No, this is not a threat. I am helping you make a choice. Feng Zihan replied. Haha, you've already said it like this. Isn't it a threat? Actually, if you didn't say this, I might have considered letting your father go. But you are very insensible. What I hate the most is being threatened. Fight to the death, right? Okay, let's have some fun from now on. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he looked at Shangguan Fenglan and said, Lord Hall Master, you definitely won't be able to find Guyong, but this disciple has a piece of evidence that can prove that Feng Wenhai is behind this. A faint smile flashed across Shangguan Fenglan's eyes as she asked, Really? Qin Feiyang nodded. Shangguan Fenglan said, Then take it out and let us see. Qin Feiyang activated the image crystal again. Feng Zihan's gaze trembled, and he secretly shouted, Jiang Haotian, don't be unable to tell good from bad. Don't scare me. I'm a coward. Qin Feiyang sneered inwardly. With a wave of his hand, an image immediately unfolded above the square. This video was the conversation between Guyong and Feng Wenhai. How could this be? Feng Wenhai's eyes trembled. Feng Zihan's face was also deathly pale. Guyong betrayed them? It really is Feng Wenhai. Oh my God! A dignified elder of the Law Enforcement Hall actually dares to frame a disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall. Where is the justice in this? Too much, too much. How could he do such a wicked thing? The square was silent for a moment, and then suddenly exploded. Everyone glared at Feng Wenhai, their faces filled with disgust. Not only did a dignified law enforcement elder of Nine Heavens Palace do such a despicable thing, he even pretended to uphold justice on behalf of the heavens. How disgusting! How pitiful! I haven't even entered Nine Heavens Palace, but I've already been framed by others and have to bear the infamy of slandering Nine Heavens Palace. Yeah, what's even more infuriating is that the person who framed him is a law enforcement elder of our Nine Heavens Palace. He's clearly breaking the law. Lord Hall Master, justice is in everyone's heart. Please uphold justice for Jiang Haoyan. That's right. He knew that he was framed, but he had no choice but to admit it. You can imagine how he felt at that time. Can someone with status do whatever they want? Don't tell me that people with no status and no family background can only be bullied. This isn't fair. The surrounding disciples roared. If it was just one person, they wouldn't dare to say anything because they were afraid of the Feng clan's revenge. But now there were hundreds of thousands of people gathered here. What was there to be afraid of? Would the Feng clan dare to kill them all? Plop! Hearing everyone's roars, Feng Wenhai slowly collapsed to the ground. His face was filled with despair. Feng Zihan's heart was burning with anxiety as he watched this scene. His hatred towards Qin Feiyang also soared crazily. He killed Feng Wenhai in one move. Big Brother Zhang's methods are terrifying. Even if it's not enough, it's still very satisfying. Senior brother Gongzi Feng, don't you think so? Gao Xiaolong laughed inwardly. However, Gongzi Feng didn't reply to him. Gao Xiaolong turned to look at Gongzi Feng suspiciously. He discovered that Gongzi Feng seemed to have changed into a different person. A gloomy aura was emitted from his body. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. His hands were tightly clenched together. And Gao Xiaolong was bewildered. Didn't this person hate Feng Wenhai? But why wasn't there any trace of happiness now? In the great meeting hall, Feng Yuan was also slumped in his chair. His mind was blank. The other leaders were also silent. No one would have thought that Qin Feiyang would actually take out such strong evidence. This time, Feng Wenhai had no way to defend himself. The first elder glanced at Feng Yuan and asked the crowd, "Everyone, let's talk. How should we deal with this matter?" The leaders hesitated. Their gazes shifted to Feng Yuan from time to time. "What's wrong? You don't know what to say. That's not good. All of you are the leaders of my Nine Heavens Palace. If you don't even know your own opinion, what's the point of my Nine Heavens Palace raising you?" The great elder looked at them with a smile. Hearing this and looking at the great elder's smile, the leaders couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. "Great elder, according to reason, this matter should be handled impartially. But Feng Yuan only has one son, Feng Wenhai. Wouldn't it be too cruel to kill him?" "That's right. Great elder, Feng Yuan has been conscientious in the resource hall all these years. Even if he didn't make any contributions, he still worked hard. Do you have the heart to see him send off his son?" "Great elder, in my opinion, this matter should be carefully considered." Several leaders spoke up. Clearly, they were pleading for Feng Wenhai. The great elder was stunned. "From what you're saying that this matter is over." "Of course not. After all, this matter has already caused public outrage. If we don't give an explanation, the disciples won't be convinced." The leaders hurriedly shook their heads. The great elder said with a smile, "So you know that this matter has already caused public outrage. This old man thought that you didn't know." "Great elder, please calm down." The leaders immediately stood up in fear. "Am I angry? I don't think so." A dignified law enforcement elder, putting down his status and pride to frame an outer disciple. "How glorious is this! This old man's face is shining. This is also a joyous matter for our Nine Heavens Palace. Don't you think so?" The great elder looked around and asked with a smile. Everyone lowered their heads. No one dared to say a word. Public outrage. The exposure of this matter will not only incur the wrath of the disciples, but also the wrath of the entire northern region. Very promising, very good. Looks like our Nine Heavens Palace is going to make a name for ourselves. This old man suggests that we hold a big banquet in the next 3 days to celebrate with the heavens. What do you think? The great elder asked. "Great elder, please calm down. How about we remove Feng Wenhai from his position and expel him from Nine Heavens Palace?" The group of giants was already panicking to the extreme. This was because they knew the old man in front of them too well. At this moment, he was at his most dangerous. Expel him from Nine Heavens Palace. The great elder chuckled and turned to Feng Yuan. "Feng Yuan, what do you think?" Feng Yuan shivered and hurriedly got to his knees, begging, "Great elder, please show mercy to Feng Wenhai on account of all the things I've done for Nine Heavens Palace over the years." The great elder said, "So you don't agree with removing him from his position and expelling him from Nine Heavens' palace?" I agree. This is what he deserves. I only ask that the great elder doesn't kill him and let him live." Feng Yuan nodded repeatedly. He knew that although the great elder asked this on the surface, the great elder already had the intention to kill him. If this old man gives him a way out, who will give our Nine Heavens palace a way out? How will the world talk about our Nine Heavens palace in the future? Come, tell this old man. As the hall master of the resource hall, you must have thought of this. The great elder chuckled. I didn't teach my son well and caused Nine Heavens Palace's reputation to fall to the ground. I'm guilty, Feng Yuan held bitterly. The great elder asked, "If you didn't teach him well, why did you give birth to him?" I'm sorry. Feng Yuan kowtowed repeatedly, his face filled with pain. His forehead hit the ground, causing his skin to split open. The great elder chuckled. "Oh, right. Feng Yuan, this matter shouldn't have anything to do with you, right?" "No, absolutely not." Feng Yuan almost jumped up and hurriedly waved his hands at the great elder. "It's been hard on you. Although the one who made a mistake this time is Feng Wenhai. As his father, you'll definitely be cursed by others. My illustrious reputation has been destroyed, just like that." The great elder shook his head, his face filled with regret. "After this matter, I'll definitely punish him severely," Feng Yuan said. "After this matter, I'm afraid it's all over." The great elder sighed. Feng Yuan's body stiffened, and he kowtowed even harder. "Great elder, please spare him. I promise to discipline him well in the future." "Great elder, look at Feng Yuan, please show mercy." Back then, when Nie Mingshan was practicing favoritism, you didn't kill him. You only expelled him. A few people said with a smile. The great elder glanced at them and said, "Slap your own mouth." Those people were stunned. "Don't you understand? Or do you want this old man to do it personally?" The great elder said, No, we'll do it ourselves." Those people hurriedly shook their heads, raised their arms, and slapped their own faces one after another. "Not hard enough," the great elder said. "Slap." Their eyes trembled, and they hurriedly used all their strength to slap themselves. One after another, loud slapping sounds reverberated in the hall. They regretted it in their hearts. Why did they have to meddle in other people's business? Weren't they just asking for trouble? Chapter 2033. In the square, the surrounding disciples were in high spirits, and their roars resounded through the sky. "You must give us an explanation today. We disciples are not animals. Why should we be harmed like this? And Feng Zihan, how did you confidently say that your father isn't such a person? But what happened in the end? You were slapped in the face. Now we are all wondering if you have a part in this." Feng Wenhai, who was at the center of the storm, was undoubtedly the target of public criticism. Even Feng Zihan was not spared and was reviled by everyone. Feng Zihan lowered his head, and his eyes were wet. This was the first time he had been treated like this. He felt like a rat crossing the street. Feng Wenhai was paralyzed on the ground, and his eyes were dull as if he had lost his soul. The reputation and status that he had fought so hard for were gone in an instant. He was in pain, but more than that, he was filled with hatred. He hated Qin Feiyang. He hated Huai. He hated Fire Lotus and Qin Rushuang. "Feng Wenhai, how long are you going to sit on the ground?" Shangguan Fenglan looked over, and her face was frosty. Chang Li did not dare to help now and stood aside obediently. He was even a little afraid. He was afraid that Qin Feiyang would settle the score with him. Feng Wenhai shuddered and quickly got up, kneeling in front of Shangguan Fenglan. "I'm sorry, Hall Master. I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Please help me plead for mercy. I don't want to die." He was no longer as arrogant as before. Now he was like a dog wagging its tail and begging for mercy. Now you know you were wrong. What were you doing earlier? It's not enough to frame them once, and you want them to frame you a second time. Do you really hate them that much? Shangguan Fenglan said angrily. I was blinded by greed. I'll change. I'll definitely change. I beg you, please help me plead for mercy in front of the first elder. Please. Feng Wenhai looked at Shangguan Fenglan pitifully with tears and snot running down his face. Sigh, I'm afraid it's useless even if I plead for mercy. Because this matter is too big. Almost everyone in the North region knows about it. And once the world finds out that Jiang Haoyan was framed by you, do you know what sort of commotion it will cause? Shangguan Fenglan sighed. Jiang Haoyan, I'm sorry, I apologize to you. Please, I beg you, help me. Feng Wenhai then scrambled to Qin Feiyang's side. Jiang Haoyan, you can't forgive him so easily for harming you. He must receive the punishment he deserves. The surrounding disciples roared. Da-da! Suddenly, Feng Zihan strode towards Qin Feiyang. Fire, Lotus, and Hui glanced at each other and quickly stood in front of Qin Feiyang. What are you doing? Qin Feiyang frowned. With so many disciples around and Shangguan Fenglan, the hall master of the law enforcement hall, Feng Zihan definitely wouldn't dare to make a move now. Even if Feng Zihan made a move, he wasn't afraid at all. This was because he could enter the Black Tortoise realm at any time. Feng Zihan stopped beside Feng Wenhai and looked at Fire Lotus and Hui, move aside. But the two of them were indifferent. Don't interfere. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and pulled the two of them back. Feng Zihan stared at Qin Feiyang, her jade-like hands tightly clenched together. You really didn't disappoint me. What a wonderful show. Frenzy leaned on the chair and crossed his legs with a cynical look. But looking at Feng Zihan's back, a cold light flickered in the depths of his eyes. Suddenly, Feng Zihan also knelt on the ground, causing a huge uproar. Senior sister, she actually knelt down to Jiang Haoyan. Oh my God, is this a dream? She who has always been high and mighty, looking down on everyone, actually knelt down in public. Everyone's eyeballs popped out. This was such a shocking and unbelievable scene. I apologize to you on behalf of my father. I'm sorry, my Feng family is willing to make up for your loss and publicly apologize. I only ask for your forgiveness. Feng Zihan lowered her head and said, kneeling was a lifetime humiliation for her, a stain that couldn't be washed away. But in order to save her father, she chose to bear this humiliation, because only this man in front of her could save her father's life. Brother Jiang, I'll also kneel down and beg you. In the crowd, Gong Zifeng ran out and knelt in front of Qin Feiyang, looking at Qin Feiyang pleadingly. You, Feng Zihan looked at Gong Zifeng in surprise. In the eyes of others, it was natural for Gong Zifeng to plead for Feng Wenhai, because Gong Zifeng was Feng Wenhai's son. But for Feng Zihan it was too surprising. Qin Feiyang was also a little surprised. Gong Zifeng ignored Feng Zihan and looked up at Qin Feiyang with tears in his eyes. Brother Jiang, I can't live without my father. Please, let him go this time, okay? Fire Lotus looked at Gong Zifeng and raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. She transmitted her voice. Qin Dage. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, looked at Gong Zifeng, and then at Feng Zihan and said indifferently, I often say to the people around me, no matter who the other party is, no matter how strong the other party is, they have to pay the price for doing wrong. Gong Zifeng and Feng Zihan's eyes trembled. They have to pay the price for doing wrong. This old man likes this sentence. Before Qin Feiyang finished speaking, a hoarse voice sounded in the sky. First Elder, I beg you, please give him a way out. Feng Zihan immediately looked up and shouted, First Elder, if you must kill my father, I'm willing to die for him. Gong Zifeng roared. Feng Wenhai's body shook, and he turned to look at Gong Zifeng in disbelief. He transmitted his voice, Shouldn't you hate me for what I did to you? I hate you very much. There are even times when I wish I could kill you. But you are still my father, my family. I can't just watch you die, Gong Zi Feng secretly said. When Feng Wenhai heard these words, it was like a bolt from the blue, and his head rumbled. This was the son he had always hated? How sensible and filial! He was even willing to die for him. Compared to the other Feng Zijun, he was much stronger. He couldn't help but feel guilty in his heart. He had let this child down. If you don't beg this old man's words don't count. Because of this matter, Jiang Haoqian is the victim. Jiang Haoyin, the choice is yours. If you want him to die, he will die. If you want to let him go, this old man will let him go. The first elder's voice slowly spread in the sky. Swish! In an instant, everyone's gaze was once again directed at Qin Feiyang, including Gong Zifeng, Feng Zihan, Feng Wenhai, and Shangguan Fenglan. Brother Jiang, what is this first elder doing? Why did he let you choose? Could it be that he doesn't want to kill Feng Wenhai? Hua Yi frowned and asked through voice transmission. Whether he wants to kill Feng Wenhai or not, I don't know, but there is one thing I am very clear about. He doesn't want to be the executioner. Qin Feiyang secretly said. What do you mean? Hua Yi was suspicious. Think about it. If he gives the order to kill Feng Wenhai, then Feng Yuan and Feng Zihan will definitely have resentment towards him. On the contrary, he gave me the choice, which is equivalent to me killing Feng Wenhai. At that time, the people of the Feng family will hate me, and it will have nothing to do with him. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Hua Yi was stunned, and the corner of his mouth twitched fiercely. He secretly said, Why do I feel that there is a hint of cunning? This first elder, although I have never met him, it is not difficult to see that he should be a cunning old fox. I even feel that this old fox is behind Shangguan Fenglan. Qin Feiyang said. What? Hua Yi was stunned and said in surprise, You mean the one who wants to kill Feng Yuan is the first elder? Don't jump to conclusions. This is just my feeling. Qin Feiyang secretly said. If it is really the first elder, then this will be interesting. Hua Yi secretly laughed, as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at him. Then what do you plan to do now? Hua Yi secretly asked. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and glanced at Shangguan Fenglan, but saw that Shangguan Fenglan was sitting there as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Is this interesting? This made Qin Feiyang very angry. To tell the truth, if the Feng family really did not come to trouble him in the future, it did not matter whether he got rid of them or not. After all, his purpose in entering Nine Heaven Palace was to investigate the ancestor and get some soul stones. He wasn't interested in this kind of power struggle. Qin Feiyang patiently asked via sound transmission, Lord Hall Master, could it be that you don't have any suggestions? The first elder has already said that you will decide Feng Wenhai's life and death. How can I, as the Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall, interfere? Shangguan Fenglan said lightly. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows without leaving a trace. He thought to himself, Why do I feel that you and the great elder are the same? Both of you want me to face these troubles alone. Do I? Shangguan Fenglan smiled faintly and fell silent. Qin Feiyang was inexplicably irritated. He felt that Shangguan Fenglan and the first elder were not good people. They were purely using him as a scapegoat. No, this was too passive. He had to take the initiative, otherwise he would not even know how he died in the future. Brother Jiang, Big Brother Jiang, please do me a favor. I promise you, Lord Father will not trouble you in the future. If Lord Father does not do it, you can take my life at any time. Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not say anything, Gong Zifeng could not wait any longer and begged again. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He suddenly looked at Feng Zihan and said, I can let your father go, but you have to agree to the conditions we discussed before. You are too shameless. Feng Zihan was furious. He did not agree before, but now that the evidence was out, he said this. Wasn't this clearly taking advantage of him and blackmailing him? How could there be such a shameless person? Thank you for the compliment. Then do you agree or not? Qin Feiyong laughed inwardly. Do I have a choice? Feng Zihan glared at Qin Feiyong. Now that his father's life was in this person's hands, how could he not agree? When will you give it to me? Qin Feiyong asked inwardly. Chapter 2034. Feng Zihan sent a sound transmission. For billion spirit stones is not a small number. Give me some time. That's not appropriate. What if I let your father go now? And after this matter is over, you go back on your word. Who can I reason with? Qin Feiyong thought, because once he nodded, there would be no chance for regret. It was impossible to say that he would go back on his word and kill Feng Wenhai after not getting the spirit stones, divine arts, and divine weapons. Who would care about such a ridiculous thing? The most important thing was, letting Feng Wenhai go now was equivalent to offending Shangguan Fenglan. In other words, this was a risky decision. If he let him go in the end and didn't get the spirit stones, divine weapons, and divine arts, then wouldn't he suffer a huge loss? Therefore, he had to eliminate all possibilities in advance. Hearing this, Feng Zihan was very dissatisfied and secretly said angrily, In my Feng Zihan's there is no such thing as going back on one's word. Who knows? Qin Feiyong pursed his lips. Feng Zihan said in a deep voice, Then what do you want? Qin Feiyong thought for a moment and sent a sound transmission. I have a secret technique to control the soul. As long as you are willing to let me control you, I will believe you. This, Feng Zihan's expression froze. Controlling the soul, wasn't it the same as handing over his life to this person? Don't worry. When you bring the spirit stones, divine arts, and divine weapons, I will naturally remove my control over you. Qin Feiyong thought, Then how do I know that when you get the spirit stones, divine arts, and divine weapons, you won't go back on your word? Feng Zihan said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyong sent a sound transmission. Now you can only save your father's life if you believe me. Feng Zihan pondered for a moment, gritted his teeth, and said, All right, I will let you control me. I like people like you, who are straightforward. Qin Feiyong chuckled inwardly. He didn't avoid everyone's gaze as he directly transformed the slavery seal into Feng Zihan's head. Because other than Fire Lotus, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing didn't know about the slave seal. So even if they saw it, they wouldn't know what it was. However, although they didn't know what it was, everyone's face was filled with suspicion when they saw his sudden actions. Slave seal. This fellow's methods are still as terrifying as ever. Mu Tianyang shook his head and sighed. Ancestor, now is not the time to praise him. Feng Zihan is the number 1 on the heaven ranking. Now that he's being controlled by this bastard, won't he be able to do whatever he wants in the 9 heavens palace? Mu Qing snorted. Wrong. Mu Tianyang shook his head. Mu Qing was slightly stunned and turned to look at Mu Tianyang suspiciously. How can a heaven's pride like Feng Zihan be willing to be controlled by others? If you provoke her, it's entirely possible that she and Qin Feiyong will perish together. And Qin Feiyong is a smart person. He must know this. So I think the 2 of them must have reached a deal in secret. Mu Tianyang transmitted his voice. Deal. Mu Qing frowned. Mu Tianyang said inwardly, Do you believe that he will let Feng Wenhai go later? Impossible. With Qin Feiyong's character, how can he let Feng Wenhai go? Mu Qing transmitted her voice. Then let's wait and see. Mu Tianyang laughed inwardly. Mu Qing frowned and looked up at Qin Feiyong, not saying a word for a long time. Could it be that he was really negotiating with Feng Zihan in secret? Feng Zihan also had extraordinary perseverance. As everyone knew, the process of controlling the enslavement seal was very painful. but she only frowned at first, and then looked extremely calm as if nothing had happened. After the enslavement seal was successful, Feng Zihan said inwardly, "As you wish, can you open your mouth now?" "No hurry. Let's wait a little longer, lest others find out that I have a private deal with you." After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he lowered his head and continued to ponder. Time passed breath by breath. Shangguan Fenglan finally lost her patience and said angrily, "Jiang Haotian, don't waste everyone's time." Qin Feiyang glanced at Shangguan Fenglan, slowly raised his head, glanced at the crowd, then looked up at the sky and said respectfully, "First Elder, I've thought about it very seriously." "Speak." The voice of the First Elder sounded in the sky. "There's a saying that it's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Now, Elder Feng has admitted his mistake and said that he will definitely change in the future. And Senior Brother Feng and Senior Sister Feng Zihan, in order to save their father, also put down their pride and pleaded with me. They even knelt down. Senior Brother and Senior Sister have already done so much. If I still don't let it go, wouldn't it seem that I don't understand the ways of the world? So I think that this matter should be let go." Qin Feiyang said. As soon as these words came out, Shangguan Fenglan immediately clenched her hands, and a hint of anger flashed in her eyes. The surrounding disciples had a look of disbelief. Feng Wenhai did this to him, but he still let Feng Wenhai go? Was there something wrong with his head? Fire, Lotus, and Hua also had a look of astonishment. They also thought that Qin Feiyang would kill Feng Wenhai, but they didn't expect that he would say such righteous words. Not only them, but Feng Wenhai, who was kneeling on the ground. Feng Yuan in the great council hall, the other big shots, and even the First Elder were also dumbfounded. They seriously wondered if there was something wrong with their ears. I know that many people will find this result unbelievable, but the human heart is made of flesh. I really can't bear to watch Hull Master Feng Yuan die before his own. Qin Feiyang sighed, looking as if he was bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. So that's how it is. He's not stupid, he's kind. He's really a good person. Elder Feng, you should be more careful in the future. Such a good person, don't harm him anymore. When the surrounding disciples heard this, they all looked at Qin Feiyang with admiration. Only Feng Zihan's eyes were full of disdain. What a pleasant way to put it! It would be a waste of his talent if he didn't go into acting. The most infuriating thing was that even though she knew that this person was pretending, she still had to treat him with a smile. "Thank you, Junior Brother Jiang." She looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled gratefully. If looks could kill, Qin Feiyang would have died countless times. "Thank you, Brother Jiang." Gongzi Feng didn't know the truth and thanked him very sincerely. Feng Wenhai also smiled gratefully at Qin Feiyang. Although he was a little surprised, although he still hated Jiang Qin, as long as he could keep his life, it was better than anything. As for the rest, he would talk about it later. "Jiang Haotian, are you sure?" The First Elder's voice sounded again. His tone was still very calm, but Qin Feiyang was keenly aware of a trace of dissatisfaction towards him. Could it be that the person behind Shangguan Fenglan was really this old fox? It seemed that this matter had to be investigated properly. "This disciple is sure." Qin Feiyang nodded. "All right, this old man will respect your choice. However, you can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. From today onwards, Feng Wenhai will be stripped of his position as the enforcement elder and expelled from Nine Heavens Palace. He will never be able to step into Nine Heavens Palace again." The First Elder said, "Thank you, First Elder, for not killing me." Feng Wenhai knelt on the ground and said gratefully, he was already very satisfied to be able to keep his life, and he had already expected this result, because the First Elder wouldn't allow a tainted person to continue staying in Nine Heavens Palace. Of course, now he didn't have the face to continue staying here. Since the truth has been revealed, Jiang Haoqian's innocence will naturally be cleared. Shangguan Fenglan, I'll leave this matter to you. The first elder said. Yes. Shangguan Fenglan stood up and respectfully replied. Then this matter will end here. The first elder's voice quickly faded away. Shangguan Fenglan retracted her gaze and shouted, Qingli, immediately send Feng Wenhai out of Nine Heavens Palace. Understood. Chengli nodded and looked at Feng Wenhai, saying, Let's go. Sigh. Feng Wenhai reluctantly glanced at Nine Heavens Palace, then let out a low sigh and flew into the air, leaving with Chengli dejectedly. Jiang Haoqian, come see me tonight. Shangguan Fenglan glanced at Qin Feiyang and said secretly before quickly disappearing. As expected, I've angered her. Qin Feiyang rubbed his forehead, feeling a little irritated. But when he thought of the 4 billion soul stones, he became spirited again. He looked at Feng Zihan and said with a smile, Senior sister, don't make me wait too long. Humph. Feng Zihan coldly snorted and turned to leave. Qin Feiyang rubbed his nose and looked at Feng Zihan's back with a smile in his eyes. Let's go, let's go. Madman also stood up and shouted. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback, then quickly looked at Madman and said with a smile, Senior brother Madman, are you satisfied with this show? The first half was pretty good, but the second half was a little boring. Madman shook his head and left. I think it's okay, Qin Feiyang muttered. Although the final result was a little different from his original plan, it still ruined Feng Wenhai's reputation and drove him out. At the same time, he also obtained 4 billion soul stones for pinnacle-level divine artifacts and 4 pinnacle-level divine arts. And it was also an indirect demonstration to Shangguan Fenglan. This was a huge profit. Jiang Haoqian, I really admire your character. Yeah, you even let Feng Wenhai go. You're really benevolent. If there's a chance in the future, please give me face and have a few drinks. I really want to make friends with you. After Feng Zihan, Chengli, Feng Wenhai, and Shangguan Fenglan left, the surrounding disciples also became active and surrounded Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang looked at the surrounding disciples with a stunned expression. It seemed that he had earned a good reputation along the way. Not bad, not bad. He couldn't be more satisfied with this result and said with a smile, All right, if there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely treat everyone to a drink. Then it's settled. You're probably tired, go rest. Everyone, let's disperse. At that moment, everyone left in groups of 2s and 3s. Mu Tianyang also left with Mu Qing and Guisweki without saying a word. Gongzi Feng didn't leave. When most of the others had left, he turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said gratefully, Brother Jiang, thank you so much. Equal exchange, no need to thank me. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. Equal exchange? Gongzi Feng was stunned and didn't understand. Chapter 2035. Go ask your big sister. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. My big sister? Gongzi Feng was even more confused. Go, I still have things to do. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. All right, let's meet again. Gongzi Feng nodded and turned around to nod at Gao Xiaolong as a form of greeting before leaving without looking back. Gao Xiaolong looked at Gongzi Feng's back and his eyes flickered. Suddenly, a light flashed in his eyes as he walked towards Qin Feiyang's group, cupping his fists and smiling. The 3 of you have finally been vindicated. Congratulations! Hua Yi chuckled. Then shouldn't you invite us to the Jade Zither Pavilion to celebrate? Me. Gao Xiaolong was taken aback and smiled bitterly. With my little financial strength, how can I afford to spend money at the Jade Zither Pavilion? You're still a disciple of the 9 Heavens Palace. Is there a need to cry poverty in front of us? Hua Yi pouted. Gao Xiaolong's dragon god was embarrassed. He wasn't crying poverty, he was really poor. Because he didn't have the courage of the 3 people in front of him, nor did he have outstanding means and strength. He could only go to the bulletin board to accept missions and earn soul stones. Don't make fun of others. Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes at Hui and looked at Gao Xiaolong. Everyone left. Only you stayed here. Is there something wrong? Gao Xiaolong nodded, and his expression became serious. Qin Feiyang's group looked at each other before looking at Gao Xiaolong again. Gao Xiaolong said inwardly, just now I noticed that Gongzi Feng's expression was a little strange. Strange? Qin Feiyang was stunned, and he asked suspiciously, What do you mean? When you took out the third video, I noticed that his expression suddenly became very scary. It felt like he hated you guys. Gao Xiaolong transmitted. Hated us? Fire Lotus frowned. Gao Xiaolong said, This is just my personal guess. Don't take it seriously. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and smiled inwardly. Actually, this matter is not beyond my expectations. What do you mean? Gao Xiaolong was a little dazed. A few days ago, when I left Nine Heaven Palace, I sent him a message and asked him these questions. At that time, he was very hesitant. What does this mean? This means that he still has some feelings for Feng Wenhai in his heart. Qin Feiyang thought. Gao Xiaolong was bewildered. Then why are you helping him? Aren't you afraid that raising a tiger will only invite calamity? I'm not even afraid of Feng Wenhai. So why should I be afraid of him? Furthermore, I've already given him advice. I think he should know his limits. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Hearing this, Gao Xiaolong nodded. That's true. Even Feng Wenhai was forced to this extent. So a mere Gongzi Feng was naturally nothing in his eyes. Qin Feiyang sized up Gao Xiaolong, then suddenly transmitted his voice to Huang Xiaolong. I have a question for you. What is it? Gao Xiaolong was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said, If one day you find out that I have a deep hatred for you, will you harm me behind my back? Me and you? What kind of deep hatred can we have? Gao Xiaolong shook his head and smiled. I said, what if? Qin Feiyang said inwardly. What if? Gao Xiaolong frowned, saying seriously, if it weren't for big brother Jiang, Xiao Hui and I would have lost our lives. Therefore, even if there is a deep hatred between us, I won't harm you. At most, it will be a debt of gratitude. Fire Lotus snickered inwardly. Qin Dage, this person is not bad. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly, saying inwardly, Old Zhao, help me count out 10 million soul stones. Okay. Zhao Tailai answered from inside the castle. Qin Feiyang looked at Gao Xiaolong, smiling. Remember what you said today. Gao Xiaolong nodded. Qin Feiyang suddenly thought of Guiyong, transmitting his voice to Gao Xiaolong. Did anyone go looking for Gongzi Feng recently? Gao Xiaolong thought for a moment, then shook his head. I don't think so. No. Qin Feiyang frowned. What is this Guiyong doing? Gao Xiaolong looked suspiciously at Qin Feiyang. Why are you suddenly asking this? Nothing. Qin Feiyang shook his head, pondering for a moment, then said inwardly, How about this? Help me keep an eye on Gongzi Feng. If there is any situation, immediately report to me. No problem. Gao Xiaolong nodded without hesitation. Young lord, it's done. At this time, Zhao Tailai's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang's mind moved slightly, and a universe bag appeared out of thin air. He looked at Gao Xiaolong and smiled. This is for you. What is it? Gao Xiaolong suspiciously received the universe bag, and when he checked it, he was dumbfounded. Inside, it was actually full of soul stones. Brother, what's inside? Fire Lotus looked curiously at the universe bag. 10 million soul stones. Qin Feiyang smiled. What? Fire Lotus's body stiffened. Fire Lotus was also dumbfounded. He actually gave Gao Xiaolong 10 million soul stones. This was too generous. He was really willing to part with it. Big brother Jiang, this? Gao Xiaolong regained his senses, looking at Qin Feiyang. He felt like he was dreaming. Keep it. Take it as a little compensation for you and Gao, shall we? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. then disappeared without a trace with Fire Lotus and Fire Lotus. Compensation? Gao Xiaolong stood dumbfounded in the square. What did this mean? Why was this person acting so weird today? What did you say? Jiang Haotian and the others slandering the Nine Heavens Palace was framed by Feng Wenhai? Yes. Are you joking? Feng Wenhai is an elder of the enforcement hall. How could he do such a thing? It's absolutely true. The nephew of a distant cousin of mine is a disciple of the Nine Heavens Palace. He saw it not long ago. He also said that Feng Wenhai has been expelled from the Nine Heavens Palace. This is too much, A dignified enforcement hall elder actually did such a despicable thing. Is it too easy for him to be expelled from the Nine Heavens Palace? It's said that Jiang Haotian forgave him. That's why he kept his little life. Is this Jiang Haotian stupid? He actually forgave him after doing such a thing to him. Toppling Feng Wenhai so easily, is he stupid? I can only say that he's a good person. Outside, the news of Feng Wenhai framing Qin Feiyang and the others spread like wildfire. Feng Wenhai instantly became a rat on the street. Everyone wanted to beat him up. Back to Qin Feiyang. At this moment he controlled the Black Tortoise world, silently flying towards the depths of the Nine Heavens Palace. Brother Jiang, where are we going? What? He asked suspiciously. Fire Lotus also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Looking for Shangguan Fenglan. Are you suspecting that the Great Elder is the real mastermind? So we have to investigate, Qin Feiyang said. I see. The two of them nodded in realization. What? He sighed. If it's really the Great Elder, then this matter won't end so easily. Half an hour passed. The Black Tortoise world finally descended above the Lotus Lake. However, after searching the entire Lotus Lake, the three of them still couldn't find any trace of Shangguan Fenglan. Could it be that she has already gone to see the Great Elder? Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang asked, Brother Hua, do you know where the Great Elder lives? I don't know about that, after all. I didn't pay attention to him before and didn't inquire about his situation. Hua Yi shook his head. Swish! But before his voice faded, an old figure descended in the sky above Lotus Lake. Qin Feiyang and the other two looked over and discovered that it was a black-haired old man with an unfathomable aura. Who is he? Fire Lotus was bewildered. I don't know. Hua Yi shook his head. The old man glanced around and went straight into the attic. Qin Feiyang controlled the Black Tortoise world and followed behind. After seeing the old man enter the attic, he sat silently beside the tea table, his face a little ugly. Could it be that he's the Great Elder? Hua Yi muttered. Another moment passed. Swish! Suddenly, a purple-clothed woman appeared above the lake. It was Shangguan Fenglan. Her face was also a little ugly. When she entered the attic and saw the black-haired old man sitting beside the tea table, she was slightly stunned at first, then hurriedly bowed and said, Greetings to the Great Elder. It's really him. Hua Yi frowned. Qin Feiyang said, Feng Wenhai's matter has just ended, and he personally came to find Shangguan Fenglan. This matter may be as you think. Outside, the Great Elder looked up at Shangguan Fenglan and said, Sit. Shangguan Fenglan sat at the side. The Great Elder asked, How are the arrangements for the aftermath? The notice has been issued. Now everyone should know that Jiang Haotian was framed. Shangguan Fenglan said, The Great Elder nodded and frowned. How did you and Jiang Haotian talk? Such a good opportunity. Why did you let Feng Wenhai go? I've been wondering about this matter. I've already asked him to come to see me tonight, and I'll ask him properly. Shangguan Fenglan said, You must ask clearly. What we need is an obedient person, not a person who agrees in public but disobeys in private. Do you understand? The Great Elder said, Understood. Shangguan Fenglan nodded. Well then, it's up to you. This old man came to you for another matter. The great elder said. What is it? Shangguan Fenglan asked. The great elder said with a faint smile, find a trustworthy person to go to the resource hall. N. Shangguan Fenglan was shocked. She looked at the great elder and said in surprise, Although Feng Yuan has been managing the resource hall well these years, he's already old and his energy is limited. It's time to find someone to help him. The great elder said with a smile. Shangguan Fenglan's pupils shrank slightly, and she asked, Then I wonder if you have someone in mind. What do you think of Jiang Haoyan? The great elder pondered for a while and looked at Shangguan Fenglan. What? Jiang Haoyan? Shangguan Fenglan was stunned. Inside the black tortoise realm, Qin Feiyang and the other two also looked at each other. Shangguan Fenglan came back to her senses and hurriedly looked at the great elder, saying, This Jiang Haoyan is not suitable. Let's not talk about trust. His qualifications are not enough. His qualifications are indeed not enough. This old man can't train him as the next hall master of the resource hall. But at present he is the most suitable candidate. The great elder said. Is it because of Feng Yuan? Shangguan Fenglan said. Chapter 2036. Feng Yuan isn't someone who only knows how to take a beating. Although Jiang Haoyan let Feng Wenhai go this time, the one who made Feng Wenhai fall to this point is still Jiang Haoyan. I don't think he'll let it go. The first elder smiled faintly. Shangguan Fenglan said, So you let Jiang Haoyan enter the resource hall and let them slowly fight. I didn't know Jiang Haoyan before. Although I don't know him now, at least I can be sure that he has the ability. The first elder said. Even if he has the ability, the other disciples won't be convinced if he suddenly enters the resource hall. After all, the treatment in the resource hall is better than other places. Shangguan Fenglan frowned. This is a problem you should think about. All right, I've said what I need to say. Think about it yourself. After the first elder finished speaking, he did not linger for a moment. With a flicker, he disappeared without a trace. He's really the one behind the scenes. Fire Lotus shook her head. Hui sighed. Fire Lotus, whether he's the one behind the scenes or not, is not the main point now. Then what is the main point? Fire Lotus was puzzled. Didn't you hear what he said? What they want is someone who's obedient. Obviously, Brother Jiang letting Feng Wenhai go this time has caused him to be dissatisfied. If Brother Jiang disobeys his wishes in the future, it will definitely bring about a fatal disaster. What Yi said. Fire Lotus was shocked and looked at Qin Feiyang. Don't be nervous. Qin Feiyang smiled at Fire Lotus and looked at Shangguan Fenglan on the screen. His eyes flickered. A moment later, Qin Feiyang looked at Hui Yi and asked, Do you know the treatment in the resource hall? You really want to go to the resource hall? Hui Yi was stunned and frowned. Qin Feiyang smiled. If the treatment is really good, why not? The treatment in the resource hall is indeed better than the outer and inner disciples. It's said that you can receive 1,000 soul stones every month. What Yi said. The treatment is really good. Fire Lotus nodded. One had to know that outer sect disciples only received 10 soul stones every month. As for the inner disciples, they only had 50. Hua Yi shot a glance at Qin Feiyang, then looked at Fire Lotus and said, In the eyes of other disciples, 1,000 soul stones is indeed very tempting. But for your big brother, he can even give away 10 million soul stones without blinking an eye. What are these soul stones worth? Fire Lotus smiled bitterly. Giving Gao Xiaolong 10 million soul stones was a little painful. Hua Yi looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Brother Jiang, why don't we withdraw? Don't meddle in other people's business, lest we invite trouble upon ourselves. You only want to retreat now. Can we make it in time? Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. He smiled and said, However, I am interested in this resource hall. What? Hui Yi was stunned. After talking for so long, he didn't even listen to a single word? Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Her eyes suddenly lit up as she asked, "Brother, you can't be… Shh!" Qin Feiyong quickly made a shushing gesture. Fire Lotus was stunned. She glanced at Hua Yi at the side, covering her mouth as she laughed. "Understood, understood." "What do you mean? After being together for so long, can't you trust each other a little more?" Hua Yi was annoyed. Qin Feiyong smiled. "It's not a matter of trust." "Then tell me, what is the problem?" Hua Yi was furious. "I don't want to implicate you," Qin Feiyong said. "Less nonsense. You want to enter the resource hall so badly. There must be some unspeakable secret." Hua Yi harumphed coldly. Qin Feiyong laughed heartily. Controlling the black tortoise world, he left Lotus Lake and flew toward the outer sect. Back in his cultivation dwelling, Qin Feiyong sent Hua Yi away, then closed his eyes and used the slave seal to sense Guiyong's location. And, a moment later, his brows suddenly furrowed. "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyong frowned. "This Guiyong seems to be hiding." Fire Lotus was taken aback. He shouldn't dare. "His current location is very far from the Nine Heavens Palace. Wait, let me peek into his inner thoughts again." Qin Feiyong muttered, then closed his eyes again. North region, west. In a very remote mountain, there was a small courtyard that had just been built. In the courtyard, a middle-aged man was lying on an armchair, drinking tea while basking in the sun, looking extremely comfortable. This person was Guiyong. Soon, a woman walked out, looked at Guiyong, and asked, "Is this really okay?" "What's wrong with this?" Guiyong laughed. The woman frowned. "Why aren't you worried at all?" "There's no need to worry. I don't believe that he can find me after hiding so far away." Guiyong sneered. "What about the slave seal?" the woman asked worriedly. "It's okay. After staying in the Nine Heavens Palace for so many years, how can I not know about this kind of control secret technique? As long as I'm far enough away, he can't erase my soul at all." Guiyong said. The woman said, "But you can't always be controlled by him like this, right? Don't worry. Feng Yuan won't let him go. Once he dies, the enslavement imprint will naturally be removed. Let's not talk about this." Guiyong waved his hand, glanced at the wooden building beside him, and asked in a low voice, "Are the two elders used to it?" The woman sighed. "How can they get used to it when they suddenly came to such a place?" "Then you should accompany them more," Guiyong said. "I will." The woman nodded. Inside the cave abode, Qin Feiyong slowly opened his eyes, which were full of ridicule. "What's wrong?" Fire Lotus looked at him curiously. "This Guiyong thinks that as long as he stays away, I can't do anything to him." "How naive!" Qin Feiyong shook his head and laughed. "Then what do you plan to do with him?" Fire Lotus asked. Qin Feiyong said, "I wanted him to help Gongzi Feng, but it seems that there's no need for that now." "He's angry," Fire Lotus said. No, no, no. It's understandable that Gongzi Feng would have such a reaction. But that's that. I can't be close to this person anymore. Naturally, there's no need to help him. As for this Guiyong," Qin Feiyong pondered for a while and smiled. "Anyway, he's just a small character. As long as he's honest, let him be." Fire Lotus nodded and asked, "You really entered the resource hall for the Vein of Souls?" "Otherwise, why would I go to the resource hall?" Qin Feiyong smiled. The Vein of Souls was controlled by the resource hall. If one wanted to obtain the Vein of Souls, they naturally had to enter the resource hall to understand the details. "You're really bold." Fire Lotus shook her head helplessly. Qin Feiyong said, "I'm just thinking about it. Whether or not I should do it, I still have to consider it carefully." Fire Lotus asked suspiciously, "Then why did you let Feng Wenhai go?" "Didn't I tell Gongzi Feng?" This is an equal deal. Qin Feiyang explained the situation briefly. After listening, Fire Lotus was dumbstruck. No wonder he suddenly changed his mind. It turned out that he had a private deal with Feng Zihan. Qin Feiyang warned, "You have to keep this matter a secret. You can't let Shangguan Fenglan and Hui Yi know about it." Fire Lotus was startled, then covered her mouth and laughed. "You want to swallow Hui Yi's share as well?" "I'm not going to swallow his share. You know how Hui Yi feels about Shangguan Fenglan. If one day he's obsessed and tells Shangguan Fenglan about this, wouldn't we be finished?" Qin Feiyang said. Letting Feng Wenhai go had already made Shangguan Fenglan unhappy. If he let her know that he had a private deal with Feng Zihan, his future in Nine Heavens Palace would be even more difficult. Fire Lotus heard this and nodded. "That makes sense, but aren't you afraid that Feng Wenhai will take revenge on you?" "Feng Wenhai has been expelled from Nine Heavens Palace. Even if he wants to harm us, he won't be able to find a chance, so there's nothing to worry about. Our biggest enemies now are Feng Yuan, Feng Zihan, and Feng Wenhai's wife Yin Hui. Of course, there's also Shangguan Fenglan and the Great Elder. These people have both status and strength. We have to be extra careful." Qin Feiyang said. Hua Lian smiled and said, "You forgot about someone, Feng Zijuan." "Him." Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, saying lightly, "It's not that I look down on him, but with his little ability, even if he was given a chance, he wouldn't be able to make any waves. If Feng Zijun heard what you said now, he would probably go crazy with anger." Fire Lotus couldn't help but laugh. Sky Dragon City. In the outskirts near the southern city gate, there were many individual courtyards scattered about. In one of the courtyards, a middle-aged man sat weakly on a chair, his entire body emitting a dispirited aura. Beside him, a man and a woman stood together, looking at the middle-aged man, their faces full of worry. These three people were Feng Wenhai, Feng Zihan, and Gong Zifeng. Suddenly, an old man walked in with large strides. "Grandfather." Feng Zihan and Gong Zifeng hurriedly bowed. Feng Yuan glanced at Gong Zifeng, then looked at Feng Wenhai, his eyebrows slightly raised. Feng Zihan hurriedly said, "Grandfather, you really can't blame father for this matter." "I know." Feng Yuan sat opposite Feng Wenhai and said in a deep voice, "Did you find Guiyong?" Feng Zihan said, "I went to his house before, but it was already empty. That means he's not dead yet. This bastard, we were so good to him, but he actually betrayed us. We must not let him off." Feng Yuan was furious. Feng Zihan said respectfully, "I will find his whereabouts as soon as possible." Feng Yuan waved his hand. "Don't worry about this matter." "Why?" Feng Zihan did not understand. "After such a big thing happened, the great clan elder will definitely pay special attention to us. He might even monitor us. So from now on, don't worry about anything. Just stabilize your position as number one on the heaven board. As long as you stabilize your position as number one on the heaven board, you will have the chance to become the palace master or the successor of the vice palace master in the future." Feng Yuan said in a deep voice. "Yes." Feng Zihan nodded. Feng Yuan asked again, "Where are Feng Zijun and your mother?" Feng Zijun is still facing the wall to reflect on his mistakes. As for mother, she is at a critical juncture of her closed-door cultivation, so I didn't dare to tell her about this. Feng Zihan said. Chapter 2037. Well done. At this time, don't disturb your mother. As for Feng Zijuan, go and tell him that if he dares to cause trouble for me in the future, I will treat it as if I don't have a grandson like him. Feng Yuan said gloomily, "If not for Feng Zijuan provoking Qin Feiyang back then, how could this have happened?" "I know," Feng Zihan replied. Feng Yuan took a deep breath. His gaze turned, and landed on Gongzi Feng. Gongzi Feng lowered his head and bent his waist, completely not daring to meet Feng Yuan's gaze. After a long time, a trace of a smile actually appeared on Feng Yuan's face as he nodded and said, "Your performance this time has made this old man very pleased." Gongzi Feng was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "This is what grandson should do." "What I should do?" Feng Yuan muttered with a trace of regret in his eyes. How good would it be if this child in front of him wasn't an illegitimate child? He secretly sighed and said, "In the future, if you need anything, just tell this old man." "Thank you, grandfather. Grandson doesn't need anything at this point." Gongzi Feng's expression became hesitant, with a trace of apprehension, and finally mustered up his courage and said, "Grandson only wants to give mother a status." Upon hearing this, the smile on Feng Yuan's face immediately disappeared and was replaced by a gloomy expression. Feng Zihan's expression also changed slightly as he glared at Gongzi Feng and shouted, "What should be said, what shouldn't be said? Don't you have any sense of propriety? Hurry up and apologize to grandfather." Gongzi Feng looked at Feng Zihan, his eyes filled with unwillingness. "It seems that this old man has misunderstood. What you did in the square wasn't because you wanted to save your father, but because you wanted to win our sympathy for your mother," Feng Yuan said with a cold smile. Gongzi Feng's expression suddenly changed and hurriedly said, "Grandfather, it's not like that. I really want to save father." But before he could finish, Feng Yuan pointed to the door and said, "Get out." "Grandfather!" Gongzi Feng was extremely anxious, and his face could not help but turn pale. "Scram!" Feng Yuan suddenly stood up and roared. Gongzi Feng's gaze trembled, and he could not help but look at Feng Wenhai and helplessly called out, "Father!" However, Feng Wenhai only raised his head and glanced at him indifferently, then lowered his head again and did not say anything. Gongzi Feng's hands clenched. Why did she have to do this to him? He just wanted to give his mother a status. Was that wrong? Father has been expelled from Nine Heavens Palace, and the Feng clan's reputation has been ruined. Grandfather is already angry, yet you say such words. Aren't you just adding fuel to the fire? He really has no sense of propriety at all. Hurry up and get out. Don't make Grandpa angry again. Otherwise, no one will be able to save you. Feng Zihan transmitted. When Gongzi Feng heard this, he looked at Feng Wenhai and Feng Yuan. He suppressed the anger in his heart and walked out with his head lowered. "You want a status? That will never happen. Our Feng clan can't afford to lose face like this." Feng Yuan shouted angrily. He was so angry that his beard was blowing and his eyes were glaring. Gongzi Feng's body trembled, and he couldn't help but shed tears. At the same time, an unresolvable resentment rose in his heart. Feng Zihan looked at Gongzi Feng's back and sighed inwardly. He walked to Feng Yuan's side and comforted, "Grandfather, he didn't do it on purpose. Don't be angry. Wouldn't it be great if they could be as sensible and promising as you?" Feng Yuan shook his head and sighed. Then he frowned and said, "Speaking of which, what did Jiang Haoyan mean this time? He actually let your father go?" This, Feng Zihan's expression stiffened. Feng Yuan looked at Feng Zihan suspiciously and asked, "It has something to do with you?" "Yes." Feng Zihan nodded. He honestly told Feng Yuan about the private deal. "That damned little bastard." Feng Yuan was furious. Feng Zihan carefully asked, "Grandfather, you won't blame me, right?" Feng Yuan was stunned. He shook his head and sighed. "You did this to save your father. Why would I blame you?" Feng Zihan sighed in relief. "But 4 billion divine crystals for peak-grade divine artifacts and 4 peak-grade divine arts. You can't take it out." Feng Yuan said, "Although I can receive a lot of soul stones every month, I've already refined them. I really can't take it out." Feng Zihan said, "It's really hard on you." Feng Yuan patted Feng Zihan's hand and said, "Let grandfather think of a way." "Thank you, grandfather," Feng Zihan said gratefully. In the room, the grandfather and grandson were happy and harmonious. However, outside the room, Gongzi Feng was squatting in a corner, crying bitterly. The resentment in his heart was getting stronger and stronger. Late at night, Jingxin Lake. The calm surface of the lake reflected the full moon. The surroundings were quiet. It was particularly peaceful. Shangguan Fenglan stood alone on the balcony, looking at the lake without moving. Her expression was calm. No one knew what she was thinking at the moment. Swish! Suddenly, a figure descended above the lake. It was Qin Feiyang. This time he did not bring Hui and Fire Lotus. He came alone. Qin Feiyang glanced at Shangguan Fenglan, then flew over and bowed. "Disciple Jiang Haotian greets, Lord Hall Master." Shangguan Fenglan did not look at him, nor did she respond to him. She kept looking at the lake, as if she did not know that Qin Feiyang had arrived. "What are you looking at? So engrossed?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. He followed Shangguan Fenglan's gaze and found that there was nothing but a few lotus flowers. After a while, Shangguan Fenglan suddenly said, "Are those lotus flowers beautiful?" Qin Feiyang was somewhat baffled and casually replied, "Beautiful. Yes, very beautiful. Especially when they are in full bloom, they are breathtaking. However, their blooming time is too short. It will not be long before they wither. And after they wither, they will no longer be able to attract people's attention." Shangguan Fenglan said faintly. Qin Feiyang frowned. She called him here just to let him listen to this nonsense? Wait, these words, something was wrong. There seemed to be a hidden meaning in her words. He pondered carefully and suddenly came to a realization. This Shangguan Fenglan on the surface was talking about the lotus flowers, but in fact she was talking about him. In other words, Shangguan Fenglan compared him to a lotus flower. If he was obedient, he would always bloom in Jiuqian Palace. But if he was not obedient, then he would slowly wither and wither like these lotus flowers. In other words, this was a warning, warning him not to mess around in the future. Shangguan Fenglan finally got to the point and said, "Answer me. Why did you let Feng Wenhai go?" "Actually, I was also very helpless about this matter. At that time you also saw that even Feng Zihan knelt down and begged for mercy. If I didn't let him go, wouldn't she take revenge on me in the future? I'm just an ordinary disciple. I have no background and no one to help me. How would I dare to offend her?" Qin Feiyang said aggrievedly. Shangguan Fenglan said angrily, "Am I not helping you?" "You?" Qin Feiyang was slightly stunned, shook his head and sighed. "Lord Palace Master is high and mighty. How would I dare to have extravagant hopes? As long as Lord Palace Master does not cheat me behind my back, I am already very satisfied." "What do you mean?" Shangguan Fenglan suddenly raised her head and stared at Qin Feiyang, two cold rays of light shooting out from her eyes. Qin Feiyang looked straight into Shangguan Fenglan's eyes and said, "What do I mean Lord Palace Master is not very clear in your heart?" Shangguan Fenglan's eyes narrowed slightly, revealing a dangerous signal. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Previously, Lord Palace Master compared this disciple to a lotus flower and warned this disciple. Now, this disciple dares to come and nag." Shangguan Fenglan said, "You actually understood it. Your comprehension is quite good. It's just so." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said with a smile, "When I was young, this disciple heard a story. The story went like this. Once upon a time there was an elephant. When it was passing by a road, it encountered an ant blocking its way. The elephant was very disdainful of this ant. Because it was big, it could casually trample the ant to death. So it shouted at the ant to get out of the way. This ant also had a temper and refused to give way. The elephant suddenly felt that its self-esteem was being challenged, so it wanted to trample the ant to death. In the face of death, the ant could only obediently give way, and then the elephant swaggered away. After that, this elephant was injured and fell to the ground, and did not even have the strength to move. It was also at this time that the little ant appeared, and it also brought a large group of ants. They ran onto the elephant and wantonly gnawed on the elephant's flesh and blood, ending the elephant's life bit by bit. After they finished gnawing on the elephant's flesh and blood, they gnawed on the elephant's bones. Finally, one day, the elephant's bones were all gnawed, and not a single bone was left. Then the little ant swaggered away proudly, and that elephant, never in its wildest dreams, would have thought that in the end it would actually die in the hands of the ants and become their food. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Hearing this story, Shangguan Finglan's hands could not help but gradually clench. This was obviously also a warning to her. Lord Palace Master, don't misunderstand. This disciple has no other meaning. I just want to express a concept. Being strong and having a hard fist does not necessarily mean that you can control the life and death of others. Qin Feiyong retracted his gaze, turned around, looked at Shangguan Fenglan, and said with a faint smile. Shangguan Fenglan loosened her hands and looked away from Qin Feiyong. She said lightly, "You are right. No one has the right to control the life and death of others. However, an elephant is an elephant and an ant is an ant. No matter how strong the ant is, it can only wait for the elephant to fall before it dares to take revenge." It seems to make sense, but many things are unpredictable, don't you think so? Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Very right. After a while, the resource hall will recruit people. This Highness wants to see just how strong this ant is. Shangguan Fenglan said expressionlessly. Then, Lord Palace Master, please wait and see. Qin Feiyong smiled. Shangguan Fenglan waved her hand and said, "You can go." This disciple will take his leave. Qin Feiyong bowed, and with a flicker, he disappeared without a trace. Elephant, ant, what a ridiculous story! Shangguan Fenglan looked at the silent night sky, and a trace of murderous intent appeared in her eyes. Elephants were also divided into smart and stupid, and a smart elephant would strangle an uncontrollable hidden danger in the cradle. Chapter 2038. When Qin Feiyong returned to his cave abode, Fire Lotus immediately went up to him and asked in concern, "How did it go?" "Not much. She wanted to intimidate me the moment she went. However, I'm not a pushover either," Qin Feiyong said. Fire Lotus frowned. "In that case, do we really have to guard against them in the future?" "Of course." Qin Feiyong sighed. "Don't." Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The two of them turned to look at the stone door. Who would come looking for them in the middle of the night? It shouldn't be Hui because Hui never knocks. Fire Lotus mumbled. Could it be the same person appeared in their minds at the same time? Qin Feiyong smiled. "Lass, go open the door and invite her in." Fire Lotus nodded with a smile, turned and ran over to open the stone door. A graceful figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was Feng Zihan. "Senior sister, please come in." Fire Lotus retreated to the side and said with a smile. Feng Zihan glanced at Fire Lotus and Qin Feiyong, who was sitting inside before entering the cave abode slowly. Fire Lotus waved her hand again, and the door of the cave abode closed tightly. Qin Feiyong pointed to a stone stool at the side and smiled. "Senior sister, please take a seat. Lass, prepare tea." "No need." Feng Zihan waved her hand and scanned the cave abode, frowning. "Your cave abode is way too shabby." Qin Feiyong smiled. "It's not your own home. Why do you have to make it so luxurious?" Feng Zihan did not waste time and took out a cosmos ring from her bosom, tossing it to Qin Feiyong. "This is what you want." "Wow. It's a cosmos ring. Senior sister, you're so generous." Fire Lotus walked to Qin Feiyang's side as though she had never seen the world and exclaimed in surprise at the Cosmos Ring. Feng Zihan said, "There are too many soul stones. The Qinkuan bag can't hold them all." Fire Lotus asked, "Do I have to return the interspatial ring to you later?" Feng Zihan raised his eyebrows and said unhappily, "Do you think I care about an interspatial ring?" Ugh! Fire Lotus was dumbfounded. She smiled embarrassedly and said, "Sorry, I forgot about your identity. It's just a Cosmos ring. You won't care about it." Qin Feiyang threw the Cosmos ring to Fire Lotus and said with a smile, "Go and check it." After he finished speaking, he sent the Fire Lotus back to the castle. Then he looked at Feng Zihan and said, "Senior sister, please wait for a moment." Feng Zihan nodded and stood there silently, giving off a cold feeling that kept people 1,000 miles away. Qin Dage, the numbers are all correct. Soon, Fire Lotus's voice sounded in Qin Feiyang's mind. Qin Feiyang's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Feng Zihan and said, "Giving it all to me so easily, aren't you afraid I'll go back on my word?" Feng Zihan raised his eyebrows. "I'm just joking, don't get excited," Qin Feiyang said, and directly removed Feng Zihan's enslavement seal. Frankly speaking, he was really afraid that Feng Zihan would fight him to the death. After all, this woman was too strong, and her status in Nine Heavens Palace was unparalleled. If the big shots of Nine Heavens Palace were to choose, they would definitely choose Feng Zihan without hesitation. After the enslavement seal was removed, Feng Zihan was relieved. But she didn't leave. She took out another interspatial ring from her bosom and threw it in front of Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He caught the interspatial ring and looked at it carefully. He was a little dazed. There were about 1 billion soul stones in this interspatial ring. What did this mean? Feng Zihan said, "Exactly 1 billion soul stones, not one more, not one less." "What are you trying to do?" Qin Feiyang frowned. 1 billion soul stones was not a small number. It was impossible to give it to him for no reason. Feng Zihan said, "I want to use this 1 billion soul stones to buy Guyong's whereabouts." Guyong? Qin Feiyang was stunned. A mere Guyong was worth 1 billion soul stones? Feng Zihan said, "I believe that Guyong is no longer of any value to you." "To me, he is indeed no longer of any value," Qin Feiyang said. Feng Zihan said, "Then give him to me. A traitor should be punished accordingly." This, Qin Feiyang was a little hesitant. Feng Zihan frowned. 1 billion soul stones are in front of you. You still don't want it. "Yes, of course." But Qin Feiyang frowned and sighed. "I won't lie to you. In fact, after the conversation with your father, Guyong was already killed by me." "Killed?" Feng Zihan was stunned and asked, "Then what about his family?" "It's not his wife and children's fault, so I didn't kill his family. I just told them to leave Sky Dragon City as soon as possible. As for where they went, I don't know." "Look at this news. Can you earn the 1 billion soul stones?" Qin Feiyang looked at the universe ring in his hand and asked unwillingly, "Are you dreaming?" Feng Zihan snatched the universe ring away. Qin Feiyang hurriedly got up and smiled. "Senior sister, I killed him and helped you vent your anger. Can't you reward me a little?" "Goodbye," Feng Zihan said coldly, then turned around and left the cave quickly. Looking at Feng Zihan's back, the smile on Qin Feiyang's face gradually disappeared and his eyes flashed. After Feng Zihan left, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and the cave stone door closed. He then entered the ancient castle. Inside the ancient castle, everyone had woken up from their seclusion, and there was a bright smile on their faces. Not to mention the divine arts and divine artifacts. Just the 4 billion soul stones were enough for them to enter the half-step divine monarch realm, and there would be a lot left. Because in total, they only needed 1 to 4 to 5 billion soul stones. I was wondering why you were so generous to give Gao Xiaolong 10 million soul stones, so you were secretly extorting a sum from Feng Zihan. The mermaid princess covered her mouth and giggled. Little girl, why are your words so unpleasant? Qin Feiyong lightly scratched her nose and said unhappily, Is this extortion? It's an equal transaction. Yes, yes, yes. An equal transaction. Thanks to this equal transaction, we don't need to worry about soul stones anymore. The mermaid princess laughed. Qin Feiyong hugged the mermaid princess and chuckled. Look, your husband is so capable. Shouldn't you give me a reward? What are you doing? The mermaid princess's face turned red as she scolded. Nothing. Don't worry about us. It's not the first time we've seen it. Zhao Tailai and the others jeered. Qin Rushuang said, Actually, we should get married earlier and add more people to our Qin family. The mermaid princess said helplessly, Sister Rushuang, why are you jeering too? This is a serious matter, not jeering. Qin Rushuang said. The mermaid princess was helpless. Qin Feiyong coughed dryly and looked at the two of them, saying, I say, your seniority is a bit ridiculous. I also want to call her great-grandmother, but she doesn't want to, saying that it makes her seem old. The mermaid princess laughed. She's old. Qin Feiyong pursed his lips. What did you say? Say it again for me to hear. Qin Rushuang was stunned and stared at Qin Feiyong unkindly. Nothing, nothing. Then from now on, should I also call you big sister? And the husband follows the wife's lead. Since she calls you sister, then I should also call you sister. Qin Feiyong chuckled. How dare you? Qin Rushuang said angrily. Why should I? Qin Feiyong was dissatisfied. Everyone else can, but not you. Because you and I are directly related by blood, so you have to call me whatever you want. Qin Rushuang said. All right. It's just a name. As long as you're happy, it's fine. Feiyong, what do you plan to do with these 4 divine artifacts and techniques? Tantai Li asked. Qin Feiyong lowered his head and looked at the 4 divine artifacts and jade slips on the ground, and fell silent for a moment. The 4 divine artifacts were a black battle axe, a crimson battle sword, a crimson gold halberd, and a golden bronze mirror. A moment later, Qin Feiyong looked at Zhao Tailai and said, Old Zhao, the battle axe is yours. Thank you, young master. Zhao, Tailai was pleasantly surprised and quickly went forward to grab the battle axe. Tang Hai, you. Qin Feiyong looked at Tang Hai, but before he could say anything, Tang Hai waved his hand and said, My Hellblade is about to evolve into a perfect divine artifact, so I don't need a divine artifact. Just give me a technique later. Okay. Qin Feiyong nodded. The Hellblade was the black dagger on Tang Hai's body. Willow Tree, the battle sword, is yours. Chui Li, the halberd, is yours. Blood Kirin, the bronze mirror, is yours. Qin Feiyong said. Thank you. Willow Tree, Chui Li, and the Blood Kirin were also very excited. The white-eyed wolf looked at Zhao Tailai, then at Qin Feiyong and said, Little Qin Zi, where is your brother? How could I forget you? Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes and took out the Sun Destroyer bow. This is for you. What about us? Yu Huang, the golden leopard, and the thunder leopard asked. Don't rush. There are only a few divine artifacts. How can everyone have a share? Take it slow. I promise that everyone here will have a peak-level divine artifact. Even a legendary divine artifact. Qin Feiyong said. Okay. Yu Huang and the other beasts nodded. Qin Feiyong looked at the 4 jade slips and smiled. As for these 4 techniques, you can decide for yourselves. Whoever is most suited to cultivate them will have them. What about you? You don't want anything? The mermaid princess looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyong hugged the mermaid princess tightly and smiled. With you by my side, why would I need those things? The mermaid princess blushed. Zhao, Tai Lai shook his head and sighed. Young master, I didn't know you were such a mushy person. Tang Hai said lightly, you don't understand. Young master is a quiet man. Qin Feiyang's face darkened. Was it because he was in a good mood and wanted to be intimate with the mermaid princess? But these guys were making fun of him. Okay, you guys take your time to discuss who the divine artifact belongs to. Fire Lotus, let's go find Guillaume. Qin Feiyang let go of the mermaid princess and looked at Fire Lotus. Find Guillaume? Fire Lotus was stunned and looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. Guillaume was worthless. Why would they go find him? Think about it carefully. Is Guillaume's head really worth 1 billion soul stones? Qin Feiyang said, his eyes shining. Chapter 2039. It's definitely not worth it. 1 billion divine crystals is probably more like it. Fire Lotus shook her head without hesitation. That's right, since he's not worth this price. Then why did Feng Zihan use 1 billion soul stones to buy Guiyang's whereabouts? Qin Feiyang said. Fire Lotus said, didn't Feng Zihan also say that she wants to kill this traitor? If it's just because Guiyang betrayed them, I don't think Feng Zihan would offer such a high price. Because even if she only gave me 10 million soul stones, I would still tell her Guiyang's whereabouts. After all, he has no value. Why not exchange for 10 million soul stones? But she took out 1 billion at once. This is worth thinking about. And before, when she heard me say that Guiyang was killed by me, I found that Feng Zihan had a feeling of relief. I feel that this matter is not as simple as it seems on the surface. Qin Feiyang thought. Fire Lotus was startled and said in surprise, could it be that Guiyang has something on Feng Zihan? I think so too. Qin Feiyang nodded. If that's the case, then we have to find him quickly in case any accidents happen. Fire Lotus said. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and then brought Fire Lotus to the cave residence. Fire Lotus asked, can you find him? Of course, but I'm too lazy to find him. Let him come find me. Qin Feiyang smiled through the slave seal. He sensed Guiyang's location and said in his mind, Guiyang, come to the north of Sky Dragon City to see me immediately. In the middle of the night, Guiyang was naturally resting, but suddenly, Qin Feiyang's voice sounded in his mind. He sat up with a start, his face full of surprise. Why would there be Jiang Haoyan's voice? Was he having a nightmare? What's wrong? The woman beside him was also awakened and looked suspiciously at Guillaume. Guillaume shook his head. Maybe I've been too tired recently, so I'm hallucinating. It's nothing. This is not an illusion. After 100 breaths, if I don't see you outside the northern city gate, I will tell Feng Yuan your whereabouts. Qin Feiyang's voice sounded again. Guillaume was stunned. Even though he was so far away from the Nine Heaven Palace, he was still able to transmit his voice directly into his mind. Furthermore, from what he said, he could even sense his location. What kind of secret technique was this? This was too heaven-defying. Seeing Guiyang's expression, the woman sat up and asked again, Are you really okay? It's okay. Don't worry. Guillaume returned to his senses and smiled at the woman. It was obvious that he loved his wife very much. The woman looked at him in confusion and asked, Then why are you so surprised? Don't ask. Guillaume smiled. He lowered his head and muttered to himself for a while. Then he lifted the quilt and quickly put on his clothes. He looked at the woman and said, I have something to do. Don't worry. Rest well. Be careful, the woman warned. I will. Guillaume nodded. He took out an illusory pill from his universe ring and transformed into an old man. He then activated the altar and rushed towards Sky Dragon City. His current location could be said to be extremely far away from Sky Dragon City. He would need to activate at least a dozen altars to reach there. At the same time, Qin Feiyang also brought Fire Lotus and quickly left the Nine-Heaven Palace. He activated an altar and descended outside the northern city gate. In the night, there was not a single person in the plains. It was extremely quiet. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus stood under a large tree outside the plains. They blended into the darkness and looked at the northern city gate from afar. 100 breaths had not passed yet. Suddenly, a black figure appeared in the sky above the plains. It was Guyong. He looked around, his face full of vigilance. Although Guyong had changed his appearance, but with the slave seal, he could sense Guyong's location. Therefore, Qin Feiyang immediately knew that it was him. Qin Feiyang thought to himself, "Turn around and walk straight out of the plains." Guyong immediately turned and flew towards where Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus were. A few breaths later, Guyong left the plains. Qin Feiyang smiled here. Guyong looked towards the direction of the voice. Helplessness flashed in his eyes as he walked towards Qin Feiyang. Fire Lotus mocked. "You hid so far away, and we still found you. Do you feel depressed?" Guyong looked at Fire Lotus and then at Qin Feiyang. He suddenly knelt on the ground and begged, "I really don't want to go back to the Nine-Heaven Palace. Please let me go. Don't be like this. Get up and talk." Qin Feiyang raised his hand and smiled. But the more it was like this, the more Guyong panicked. "What are you afraid of? I am not here for you to go back to the Nine-Heaven Palace." Qin Feiyang was helpless. "You aren't?" Guyong was stunned for a moment before he sighed in relief. He stood up and asked, "Then why are you looking for me?" "Do you know? Earlier, Feng Zihan came to me with 1,000,000,000 soul stones and told me to tell her your whereabouts." Qin Feiyang said. "What?" Guyong's face paled as he hurriedly asked, "Then did you tell her?" "If I had told her, then I wouldn't be the one looking for you. She would be the one looking for you." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Thank you." Guyong was moved to tears. No, 1,000,000,000 soul stones, such a large sum. Anyone would be moved. But this person in front of him didn't want it? Could it be that he has a bigger scheme? Qin Feiyang patted Guyong's shoulder and smiled. "Don't worry, I don't have a scheme. Even if I did, it wouldn't be against you." Guyong was stunned and frowned. "You can really peek into my thoughts?" "Of course. That's what it is. Why would I lie to you?" Qin Feiyang said. Guyong asked suspiciously, "Then why did you call me here?" "Let's change places and talk slowly." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and brought Fire Lotus and Guyong to the courtyard in the center of the Black Tortoise Realm's herb field. "Sit." Qin Feiyang pointed to the stone bench and smiled. Guyong sat down nervously. "Don't be so nervous." Qin Feiyang comforted him and said, "According to my guess, this Feng Zihan spent 1,000,000,000 soul stones to buy information about you. It shouldn't be as simple as you betraying them." Guyong's eyes trembled slightly when he heard this. Then he lowered his head and remained silent. Qin Feiyang was not in a hurry. He took out the set of Proud of the Blue Sea and asked Fire Lotus to bring some water over. Then he slowly brewed tea. Soon, the fragrance of tea filled the air. Qin Feiyang poured a cup and pushed it in front of Guyong. "Thank you." Guyong thanked him and grabbed the teacup. He did not drink, lowered his head, and continued to remain silent. Qin Feiyang picked up the teacup and took a sip. He looked at Fire Lotus and smiled. "Girl, this tea is rare. It was given to me by an old man. He spent a lot of effort to cultivate this tea. You should try it." Fire Lotus poured a cup and tasted it curiously. She said in surprise, "There is actually a medicinal fragrance." "That old man planted the tea tree in the herb field, so it has a medicinal fragrance." Qin Feiyang smiled. The old man he was talking about was the pavilion master of the Forgotten Continent's trading pavilion. "I see." Fire Lotus nodded in realization. After Qin Feiyang drank a few cups, he looked at Guyong and said, "After thinking for so long, you still haven't decided?" Guyong sighed deeply. He was not in the mood to drink tea. He put down the teacup and looked up at Qin Feiyong, saying, "They probably want to silence us." "Silence us?" Qin Feiyong and Fire Lotus looked at each other. Was there really something fishy about this? Guyong said, "After following Feng Yuan for so many years, he trusted me a lot, so I know everything he did before." What did he do before? Qin Feiyong was curious. Guyong was a little hesitant. Qin Feiyong smiled. "Drink a cup of tea and moisten your throat. Tell me slowly." Guyong glanced at Qin Feiyong, picked up the teacup and took a sip. Then he made up his mind and said, "I know if I don't tell you today, you won't let me go." Qin Feiyong said, "It's good that you know. Feng Yuan has done a lot of despicable things in the resource hall these years. For example, he used his authority to deceive his superiors and subordinates, eliminate dissidents, and take bribes and bend the law to fill his own pockets. Moreover, he also bribed people from the law enforcement hall behind the scenes, preparing to take away Shangguan Fenglan's power and replace her with Feng Wenhai. You can say that if all the things he did in the past are exposed, he will definitely die." Guyong said, "Sure enough, there's something." Qin Feiyong muttered, "Let's talk about soul stones." The inner sect is different from the outer sect. Outer sect disciples receive soul stones at the duty hall. Inner sect disciples go directly to the resource hall to receive them. And Feng Yuan used his authority to give Feng Zihan 5 million soul stones every month. Even for Feng Zijuan, he gave her 500,000 soul stones every month. Guyong said, "What, 5 million? Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. That's a whole 5 times more, because Feng Zihan himself received 1 million soul stones every month. And Feng Zihan's deity techniques and deity artifacts were basically taken out by Feng Yuan from the resource hall's treasury and given to her." Guyong said, "This is more than just bribery and bending the law. He simply treats the resource hall as his own home." Fire Lotus said angrily, "This is normal. As the hall master of the resource hall, who wouldn't be tempted to look at those treasures all day long?" Qin Feiyong shook his head with a smile, looked at Guyong and asked, "Other than these, is there anything else special?" "Something special?" Guyong was stunned. Qin Feiyong said, "That is the kind that is enough to kill him instantly." Guyong lowered his head and pondered. Fire Lotus said, "Brother, to be so greedy and want to make Shangguan Fenglan a mere figurehead. This is enough to kill him." "I know, but when it comes to information, the more the better," Qin Feiyong said with a smile. A moment later, Guyong's eyes suddenly lit up. He looked up at Qin Feiyong and said, "There's one thing that should be special." "What is it?" Qin Feiyong was looking forward to it. Guyong said, "The great elder's son, the previous hall master of the resource hall, was assassinated by Feng Yuan." "What?" Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded. Fire Lotus was also shocked. Feng Yuan assassinated the great elder's son? If this really happened, then it couldn't be described as special. It should be described as shocking. Chapter 2040. You might not know, but Feng Yuan used to be a follower of the first elder son. But he was very calculative. He used the first elder son to climb up step by step. In the end, he set his sights on the throne of the resource hall master. But since the other party was the first elder son, he didn't dare to act rashly. So he waited patiently and slowly looked for an opportunity. Then, one day, the first elder son received news that a Class 9 soul line had been born in the Sky Dragon Sea. There are only 3 Class 9 soul lines in Nine Heaven Palace, so the first elder's son took some people and went to the Sky Dragon Sea. Among them was Feng Yuan. Guyong said. Qin Feiyong asked, "Is there really a Class 9 soul line?" "There is. However, The birth of this Class 9 soul line also attracted the attention of the Treasure Hall and other factions. At that time, the various factions had a bloody battle. The Treasure Hall sent the current Vice Hall Master. He was very strong and directly injured the First Elder's son. But because of the First Elder's face, he didn't kill him. But Feng Yuan took the opportunity to kill the First Elder's son while he was recuperating. His companions were all killed by him to keep their mouths shut. At that time, this matter even caused a huge commotion in the northern region. Guyong said, "That's for sure. After all, the other party was the First Elder's son." Then what did Feng Yuan say to the First Elder when he returned? Qin Feiyang asked. He told the First Elder that he was attacked by sea beasts on the way back. He blamed the Treasure Hall's Vice Hall Master, saying that if the Vice Hall Master hadn't injured his son, he wouldn't have died in the Sky Dragon Sea. Because of this matter, the First Elder personally went to the Treasure Hall. If the Treasure Hall Master hadn't stopped him, the Vice Hall Master would have died at the First Elder's hands. Guyong said. Fire Lotus smiled bitterly. He's probably the only one who dares to go to the Treasure Hall. Qin Feiyang said, "This shows how terrifying this old man's strength is." The First Elder's strength cannot be described with the word terrifying. According to Feng Yuan, if the First Elder were to go all out, there would not be more than 5 people in the entire northern region who could fight against him. Guyong said, "Terrifying, truly terrifying." Then, did Feng Yuan naturally become the hall master of the resource hall? Qin Feiyang asked. Yes, because Feng Yuan has been following the First Elder's son, he is more familiar with the situation in the resource hall than anyone else. Furthermore, he wasn't weak at that time. So the Great Elder and the Vice Palace Master discussed and let him take up the post. Guyong said. Qin Feiyang asked, "How many years ago did this happen?" Guyong thought for a moment and said, "It should be more than 10,000 years ago. Anyway, it's been a long time." Then how do you know so clearly? At that time, you hadn't followed Feng Yuan yet, right? Qin Feiyang said. Indeed, I didn't, but this was told to me by Feng Yuan himself. It's definitely true. Guyong said solemnly. Fire Lotus said in surprise. Feng Yuan even told you such an important thing. He said it once when he drank too much. Of course. It's also because of his trust in me. You can say that in terms of trust, even his own son, Feng Wenhai, can't compare to me. Guyong said proudly. Not bad. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. It was not difficult to gain a person's trust. However, it wasn't easy for someone to trust him so much. It meant that Guyong was indeed very smart. Fire Lotus shook her head and said, "To be honest, I feel a little sorry for Feng Yuan now." Why? Qin Feiyang and Guyong looked at her suspiciously. Fire Lotus looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Think about it. Feng Yuan trusted him so much, but he betrayed Feng Yuan. Don't you think such a person is hateful?" Heard about it. Guyong looked rather embarrassed. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but want to laugh. He looked at Guyong and said, "Don't mind her. This girl is just telling the truth." "I won't." Guyong waved his hand, but then his expression froze. He originally thought that Qin Feiyang was comforting him, but after thinking about it carefully, it didn't seem to be the case. He was just telling the truth. Was this considered comforting him? Was there a need to go overboard? Besides, if it weren't for you, would I have betrayed Feng Yuan? But he didn't dare to say these words. Qin Feiyang coughed and asked, "Besides you, who else knows about this?" Feng Wenhai and Yin Hui know, but the descendants, such as Feng Zihan and Feng Zijuan, know nothing. Guyong said. Qin Feiyang said, "Is the deputy pavilion master of the treasure pavilion still around?" Yes. Guyong nodded and said, "I heard that he's in seclusion." Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and said with a smile, It seems that keeping you alive is the right choice. All right, you go back first. I'll look for you if I need anything in the future. Don't look for me, okay? I'll tell you another secret. Guyong said with a bitter face. Qin Feiyong was stunned and asked curiously, what secret? Feng Yuan has an account book in his hands. All the things he has embezzled over the years are recorded in this account book. As long as you can get this account book, it's equivalent to holding his life in your hands. Guyong said. Qin Feiyong's eyes lit up and he asked, where is this account book? Guyong said, it's in his interspatial ring. He carries it with him everywhere and never leaves his side. Never leaves his side. Qin Feiyong frowned. This was a little difficult. Guyong said, look, I've already told you such an important thing. Can't you let me go? Don't worry. If there's nothing particularly important, I won't disturb you. Qin Feiyong smiled comfortingly. Guyong sighed helplessly. Anyway, you don't intend to let me go. As long as you behave yourself, I guarantee that you'll live a good life. All right, you can go back. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and sent Guyong out. Fire Lotus said suspiciously, Qin Dage, taking bribes and bending the law is a serious crime. Why does Feng Yuan keep an account book? Because he has to reconcile the accounts. Although he's in charge of the resource hall, the first elder will definitely check the accounts at any time. If he doesn't record it in the account book, then he won't know how to reconcile the accounts. After all, if he's too greedy, sometimes even he will forget where the money he took went. Qin Feiyong said. In other words, the account book he showed the first elder is the public account, while the one in his hand is the hidden account. Fire Lotus said. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded and smiled. It seems like I have to go to the resource hall. Only by entering the resource hall would he be able to get close to Feng Yuan. Only by getting close to him would he have a chance to obtain the account book. You know that there's a tiger in the mountain, but you still want to go there. Fire Lotus rolled her eyes at Huang Xiaolong. Isn't there another saying? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Qin Feiyong smiled and left the Black Tortoise world with Fire Lotus. After returning to the Nine Heavens Palace, he went to the ancient castle with Fire Lotus to cultivate in seclusion. Chapter 2041. After a period of time, it finally calmed down. No one came to find trouble with Qin Feiyong anymore. But outside, the matter of Feng Wenhai framing Qin Feiyong did not die down. Everyone would often discuss this matter after dinner. The Feng family's reputation was ruined, and everyone despised them. Qin Feiyong became the idol of many young people. Not only did he have courage, but he also had brains. This was especially true for many young girls. When the name Qin Feiyong was mentioned, their eyes couldn't help but shine. Time passed quickly. More than a month passed. Boom! Inside the ancient castle, a terrifying aura appeared. This aura had already reached the level of a perfect war god. The owner of this aura was Qin Feiyong. Swish! He opened his eyes and 2 rays of divine light shot out. It was indeed different with the Soul Stone. Of course, with the Soul Stone and without the ancient castle it would not be so fast. You broke through. Fire Lotus stood at the side and smiled at Qin Feiyong. Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded and restrained his aura. He looked up and sized up Fire Lotus. The aura emitted by the Fire Lotus was also a level stronger than before. Obviously, she had also reached the level of perfect war god. Fire Lotus shook her head and said, I really don't like to cultivate. It's too boring sitting here all day. Qin Feiyong was stunned. He stood up and knocked Fire Lotus's head hard. Do you know how many people want to cultivate in the ancient castle? You're good, you're bored. You really don't know how lucky you are. Fire Lotus rubbed her head and laughed. Qin Feiyong smiled helplessly and took out the image crystal. Buzz! Not long later, a figure appeared. It was Gao Xiaolong. Gao Xiaolong's aura had also reached the level of a perfect war god. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, "You've already broken through?" "Yes. This is all thanks to the soul stone Brother Jiang gave me. I could have broken through to perfect war god long ago, but I didn't have the soul stone and could only rely on myself." Gao Xiaolong sighed helplessly. Qin Feiyang smiled and asked, "How's the situation outside recently?" "Nothing much. Feng Yuan, Feng Zihan, and Feng Zijuan are all very honest. It's just that Gongzi Feng has some problems." Gao Xiaolong frowned. "What is it?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Gao Xiaolong went on, "Last time at the square, he pleaded for Feng Wenhai. Do you still remember?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Because of this, Feng Yuan's attitude towards him finally changed. But good times don't last. Back then, Feng Yuan asked young Master Feng if there was anything he wanted. What he meant was that he was prepared to nurture him. But can you guess how Gongzi Feng answered? He told Feng Yuan that he didn't need anything. He just wanted to give his mother a status. This sentence angered Feng Yuan again, and he chased him out of the house on the spot. Since then, he has been staying in the restaurant all day. I tried to persuade him, but it was useless. It was as if he had no soul. Gao Xiaolong shook his head, sympathy written all over his face. Qin Feiyang was silent for a long time when he heard this. I thought he was a smart person, but it seems like I overestimated him. Gao Xiaolong asked, "You also think that he's wrong?" "Of course he's wrong. Feng Wenhai's matter has already ruined the Feng family's reputation. If he reveals his mother's identity at this time, won't the Feng family be even more embarrassed? Anyone with half a brain wouldn't do such a stupid thing." Qin Feiyang said, "I think so too," and I told him the same thing. But now, other than hatred, he won't listen to anything. Gao Xiaolong said, "Forget it. There's no need to help such a stupid person." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. If Gongzi Feng could endure for a bit and wait for this matter to pass, wait for Feng Yuan to calm down, and then mention to Feng Yuan about clearing his mother's name, then it would definitely be a different situation. Gao Xiaolong sighed. Actually, he's quite pitiful. There are too many pitiful people in this world. One more won't make a difference. Qin Feiyang said indifferently. That's true. Gao Xiaolong nodded with a smile. In fact, he knew that Qin Feiyang was exasperated at Gongzi Feng's failure to live up to his expectations. Qin Feiyang asked, "How's your sister recently?" "Not bad. I gave her half of the 10 million soul stones you gave me, and she's in seclusion now." Gao Xiaolong smiled. Qin Feiyang praised, "Good. She doesn't forget her family. Very good. Now, she only has me as her brother. If I don't take care of her, who will?" Gao Xiaolong sighed. Qin Feiyang said, "I admire you for this." Gao Xiaolong scratched his head, feeling a little embarrassed. Suddenly, Gao Xiaolong seemed to have thought of something, and his brows furrowed slightly. He looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Recently, something big happened in the treasure pavilion." Qin Feiyang asked, "What's the matter?" Gao Xiaolong said, "I remember that half a month ago the treasure pavilion auctioned off a pill called 9 Revolutions Dragon Blood Pill." 9 Revolutions Dragon Blood Pill. Qin Feiyang's eyes narrowed. This Mu Tianyang really acted fast, ah. Last time, it was Mu Qing who acted on her own, but this time it was definitely Mu Tianyang who acted personally. Moreover, it was 100% done with soul stones. Because Mu Tianyang was different from Mu Qing, he wouldn't waste such a good opportunity to earn soul stones. All right, if there's any situation in the future, remember to inform me at once. Qin Feiyang looked at Gao Xiaolong and smiled. Okay, Gao Xiaolong nodded. Qin Feiyang turned off the image crystal and fell into deep thought. Fire Lotus said, "Qin Dage, we can't let Mu Tianyang and the treasure pavilion continue to cooperate like this. But the treasure pavilion has banned me. I can't stop them. Ah! Qin Feiyang felt helpless. We can go look for Shangguan Fenglana. She's Shangguan Qiu's sister. Shangguan Qiu will definitely listen to her. Fire Lotus laughed. Forget it. I don't want to face this woman at all. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, smiling. Let's go. I haven't been to the treasure pavilion since I was banned. You also don't want to cultivate, right? Let's go take a look at the treasure pavilion today. Go now. Aren't you looking for trouble? I don't want to go. Fire Lotus shook her head. Girl, do you really think I don't have a way to deal with that Shangguan Qiu? Qin Feiyang chuckled. What way? Fire Lotus was stunned as she looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. You'll know in a while. Qin Feiyang smiled, took Fire Lotus and left the Black Tortoise realm, then walked out of the cave and flew towards the sky stairway. Jiang Haoyan, Jiang Fire Lotus, wait up. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus stopped and turned to look, only to see Cheng Li flying towards them. Both of them were stunned. Why was Cheng Li looking for them? Cheng Li flew over and asked suspiciously, Where are you guys going? I have something to do in Sky Dragon City. May I ask what's the matter, Elder? Qin Feiyang asked. It's like this. The higher-ups have decided to let the two of you, Jiang Rushuang and Hui, enter the inner sect. I'm here to inform you. Cheng Li laughed. Enter the inner sect? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Actually, you guys were originally inner sect disciples, but because you were framed by Feng Wenhai, you were demoted to the outer sect. Now that the truth is out, it's only right for you to return to the inner sect. Cheng Li said, What about the reward for first place? Since we were wronged, the reward for first place should be returned to us. Fire Lotus said, I'm afraid. Cheng Li was in a difficult position. Elder Cheng. To be honest, we're already used to the life of the outer sect and don't want to go to the inner sect yet. Why don't you go back and let us stay in the outer sect? Qin Feiyang said, Don't want to go to the inner sect? The corner of Cheng Li's mouth twitched. If you want the reward for first place back, just say it. Why find such an excuse? The reward for first place has already been given to Mu Tianyang. It's impossible to return it to you. If you insist on not going, I won't force you, but don't regret it. 3 days later, the resource hall will be recruiting. At that time, only inner sect disciples are qualified to sign up. Cheng Li said, Resource hall is recruiting? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus looked at each other. Yes, the treatment in the resource hall is even better than the inner sect. Even I want to join. Cheng Li smiled. Are you sure only inner sect disciples can sign up? Elder, don't try to trick us. Qin Feiyang said. Jiang Haoyan, you're being rude. In any case, I am an elder. Why would I lie to disciples like you? Cheng Li said angrily. Don't be angry, don't be angry. Disciple was just saying it casually. Qin Feiyang quickly apologized. Actually, Cheng Li sighed and smiled. You're now a famous person in Nine Heaven Palace. To be honest, I don't want you to go to the inner sect. But this is an order from the higher-ups. No one can go against it. Prepare to go to the inner sect. Okay, after we return from Sky Dragon City, we'll go to the inner sect. Qin Feiyang nodded. Okay then, when the time comes, help me tell Jiang Rushuang and Hui, so I don't have to make this trip again. Cheng Li said. Okay. Qin Feiyang nodded and said. After Cheng Li left, Fire Lotus said suspiciously, Why do I feel that this person is trying to curry favor? Feng Wenhai has already fallen, so he has no one to rely on. Naturally, he wants to curry favor. These are all small fries. There's no need to take them seriously. Let's go. Qin Feiyang smiled, turned around, and tore through the sky like a bolt of lightning. Sky Dragon City. Treasure Pavilion. It's Jiang Haoyan and his sister, Jiang Fire Lotus. This Jiang Haoyan How could he be a perfect war god? I remember that during the exam he was only a beginner war god. How could he be so fast? The moment Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus appeared, they caused a commotion. A group of people surrounded them as if they were long-lost relatives. Even Qin Feiyang couldn't withstand their enthusiasm. He quickly pulled Fire Lotus and walked towards the entrance of the treasure pavilion. In front of the treasure pavilion, 2 guards stood straight. Seeing Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus walk over, they looked at each other and stepped in front of the entrance. What's the meaning of this? Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Young Master Jiang, we're just following orders. Please don't make things difficult for us. The 2 cupped their hands and said with an apologetic expression, Chapter 2042. Qin Feiyang frowned. Did I make things difficult for you? You're the ones making things difficult for me. The 2 of them looked at each other, not knowing how to respond. What do you mean? The treasure pavilion is open for business. Why are you stopping Zhang Haoyan and his sister? What do you mean by following orders? Whose orders are these? The surrounding crowd began to question them. Qin Feiyang had not been to the treasure pavilion since he was banned, so no one knew about it yet. Yes, why are you stopping us? Did I offend you? Qin Feiyang pretended to be confused. No. The 2 guards quickly waved their hands, feeling bitter. If it were in the past, they would have been fearless. However, the situation was different now. Qin Feiyang had won the hearts of the people in Sky Dragon City. If the fact that they banned Qin Feiyang was exposed, the treasure pavilion might drown in everyone's spittle. No, then I'm puzzled. If I didn't offend you, why can't I enter the treasure pavilion? Don't tell me the treasure pavilion banned me, Qin Feiyang said. What? Banned? Why did they ban you? The crowd looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. I don't know either. I don't think I've done anything wrong to the treasure pavilion. But if they didn't ban me, why can't they let me in? Qin Feiyang said innocently. Shangguanqiu, come out. You have to make this clear today. How dare they ban Zhang Haoyan? Who gave you the right to do that? Come out. If you don't make it clear today, we won't come to the treasure pavilion in the future. The crowd roared with righteous indignation. Could it be that some people in the treasure pavilion were bribed by Feng Wenhai? Fire Lotus said suddenly. What? Bribed by Feng Wenhai? Preposterous! Preposterous! The dignified treasure pavilion is actually colluding with such shameless people. Shangguanqiu, stop hiding. Come out and give us an explanation. Otherwise, we will chase your treasure pavilion out of Heavenly Dragon City. The crowd roared furiously. It's over. This is going to be big. The 2 guards were burning with anxiety. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. The treasure pavilion was able to stand tall in the northern region because of its reputation and the support of the common people. If they offended everyone, then the treasure pavilion would no longer be able to maintain a foothold in the northern region. Suddenly, surrounded by a group of staff members, Shangguanqiu walked out of the treasure pavilion and stood at the entrance with a gloomy face. Shangguanqiu, speak clearly. Why did you ban Zhang Haoyan? Was he bribed by Feng Wenhai? The crowd roared. I'd like to see how you're going to handle this, Qin Feiyang mumbled. Shangguanqiu glanced at the crowd and raised his hand. Everyone, please be quiet. The crowd fell silent and waited for him to continue. The treasure pavilion did not ban Zhang Haoyan. It's just that we were entertaining an important guest and did not want to be disturbed, so we temporarily blocked Zhang Haoyan outside. Shangguanqiu smiled. That's strange. What does your entertaining of an important guest have to do with me entering the treasure pavilion? I'm not here to look for you. Qin Feiyang frowned. That's right. He's not here to look for you. and he won't interfere with your entertaining of an important guest. Why did you block him outside? Even if you want to find an excuse, shouldn't you at least find a better one? The crowd said angrily. Shangguan Qiu was furious. He glared at Qin Feiyang and smiled at the crowd. I didn't think it through. I hope everyone can forgive me. No, no, no. With Steward Shangguan's intelligence and ability, how could he not think it through? There must be another reason. Qin Feiyang said. Fire Lotus also said, if you can't even think about this, then what ability do you have to be the steward of the treasure pavilion? Shangguan Qiu was going crazy. He said telepathically, don't push your luck. Push my luck? Qin Feiyang smiled inwardly and turned his head to look at the crowd behind him. He said angrily, everyone just now, this manager actually sent me a voice transmission to warn me not to push my luck. I really don't know what I've done to the treasure pavilion. How is this pushing my luck? Shangguan Qiu was furious. He looked at Qin Feiyang fiercely, as if he wanted to skin him alive. That's too much. Even if he's on death row, he should announce his crime before he's executed. Shangguan Qiu, you've gone too far. You like to ban people so much, right? Then ban us too. Even if you don't ban me, I won't come to the treasure pavilion anymore. This place makes me sick. It's disgusting. Everyone's faces were full of disdain. It's not like this, it's not like this. Shangguan Qiu was anxious. The situation was getting out of hand. There was no way to end it. If it's not like this, then what is it? You have to give a reasonable explanation. You can't bully people just because the treasure pavilion is powerful. Qin Feiyang said. Shangguan Qiu said to himself, can you stop talking? I'm begging you. You're the steward of the treasure pavilion, the disciple of the pavilion leader, and the sister of the tribunal leader. How can I let you beg me? But I just don't feel good. My sister, Fire Lotus, and my 2 subordinates were all kicked out by you. Qin Feiyang telepathically said. Can I apologize to you? If not, I'll compensate you for your loss. I just beg you to stop making trouble. Shangguan Qiu said helplessly. Then do something. Do you need me to teach you how to apologize? Qin Feiyang sneered. Shangguan Qiu gritted his teeth and glared at Qin Feiyang. He glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, everyone, it's my fault for not thinking things through. I apologize to Zhang Haoyan and Zhang Hulian right now. After that, Shangguan Qiu looked at Qin Feiyang and Zhang Haoyan, bowed and said, I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. This, Qin Feiyang hesitated. He looked at the crowd behind him and asked, everyone, what do you think we should do? We'll do whatever you say. Anyway, we'll support you. Everyone shouted. Thank you for your love and respect. I, Zhang Haoyan, deserve this. Please accept my bow. Qin Feiyang bowed and said, Brother Zhang, you're welcome. We're on the side of justice. We can't bend to evil forces like the treasure pavilion. Everyone laughed. Evil forces? Shangguan Qiu's mouth twitched. Thank you, thank you. Actually, this is just a small matter. Since Shangguan Qiu has apologized, let's be generous and forgive him. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Brother Zhang's magnanimity is well-deserved. I'm impressed. The crowd sighed and looked at him with admiration. You're flattering me. After all, humans are not saints. Who can be faultless? Qin Feiyang waved his hand and said with a smile, seeing Qin Feiyang's humble attitude in front of the crowd, Shangguan Qiu was about to go crazy. He said to himself, Are you done? Qin Feiyang turned and looked at Shangguan Qiu with evil intentions. Shangguan Qiu's heart skipped a beat. His attitude suddenly changed. He walked to Qin Feiyang and said with a smile, Young Master Zhang, it's too noisy outside. Let's go to the VIP room and talk. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He asked seriously, Is it appropriate for a nobody like me to go to your VIP room? Of course, of course. In the treasure pavilion, there's no difference in status. Once you enter the treasure pavilion, you're our distinguished guest. Shangguan Qiu said with a flattering smile. Is that so? Qin Feiyang did not believe him. Of course, of course. Please come in. Miss Fire Lotus, please come in too. Shangguan Qiu nodded and pushed the two of them into the treasure pavilion. Brother Jiang, I've heard a lot about you. Brother Jiang, can we have a few drinks together? I've admired you for a long time. The guests in the treasure pavilion were also very enthusiastic. Thank you, thank you. If there's a chance, I'll treat everyone to a drink. Qin Feiyang also bowed to them one by one. Shangguan Qiu snorted secretly. I didn't expect you to be so popular now. This is called the unpredictable world. It also proves a principle. Don't underestimate anyone. Steward, you're right. Qin Feiyang snickered secretly. You're so proud of yourself. Shangguan Qiu said disdainfully in his heart. He led Qin Feiyang and Li Mu straight to the third floor and entered a VIP room. Take a seat first. I'll come to see you after I send that distinguished guest away. Shangguan Qiu said coldly. He turned and walked directly to the VIP room next to him. Qin Dage, you've made her so obedient just like that. You're really something. Fire Lotus smiled in admiration. This is just a small matter. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. He looked at the VIP room next to him and murmured, Who's in that VIP room? Is it important who it is? Fire Lotus was puzzled. If it's someone else, it's not important. But if it's Mu Tianyang or Mu Qing, it'll be interesting. Let's go and have a look. Qin Feiyang called out and quietly walked to the door of the VIP room. He pressed his ear against the door and listened carefully. Is it Jiang Haoyan? Other than him, who else can make such a big scene? This guy is not easy to deal with. You have to be careful. I know. This is the payment for the last batch of 9 transformation dragon blood elixirs. You can count it. Haha, we've worked together for so long. There's no need for that. A familiar conversation entered Qin Feiyang's ears. It's really Mu Qing? Qin Feiyang was shocked. He kicked the door open and saw Shangguan Qiu and Mu Qing sitting opposite each other in front of the tea table. Mu Qing was holding a cosmos bag in her hand. Mu Qing and Shangguan Qiu were stunned by the sudden situation. How could there be such a rude person? He didn't even knock on the door and just barged in. Shangguan Qiu was angry. He stood up and was about to scold him. But at the same time, Qin Feiyang stepped forward and landed beside the tea table. He snatched the cosmos bag from Mu Qing's hand. Bastard, what are you doing? Mu Qing came to her senses. She looked at the cosmos bag in Qin Feiyang's hand and shouted angrily. Chapter 2043. Don't be nervous. I just want to see how much you've earned this time. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. He lowered his head to check the heaven-earth pouch, and a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. I'll be a fool if I believe you. Mu Qing snorted secretly and went forward to snatch the heaven-earth pouch. Bang! Qin Feiyang did not even raise his head. He only waved his hand. Mu Qing immediately wailed and flew out like a meteorite, crashing into the chair beside her. With a crack, the chair shattered. Mu Qing also rolled on the ground in a sorry state. What? Shangguan Qiu was stunned. It was only now that she noticed Qin Feiyang's cultivation. He was actually a perfected god of war. Mu Qing got up and stared at Qin Feiyang in shock. How long had it been? He had actually broken through to the perfected god of war. Fire Lotus walked to Qin Feiyang's side and asked curiously, Brother, how much? Not bad. At least over 1 million. And as I expected, it's soul stones. Qin Feiyang smiled. Mu Qing said in a low voice, It's only over 1 million. It shouldn't be a big deal to you. You can't say that. Who would complain about having too many soul stones? Why don't you take these over 1,000,000 soul stones as compensation for me? Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Qing playfully. How dare you? Mu Qing said angrily. Qin Feiyang was a little dissatisfied. He said, You interrupted me halfway and caused me to lose so much. I haven't even settled the score with you. Now, you can't even bear to part with these soul stones? You can only blame yourself for being useless. Mu Qing snorted coldly. Yes, I'm useless. Give these soul stones to me. I don't want them now. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he threw the heaven-earth pouch to Mu Qing. Mu Qing heaved a sigh of relief as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Then, she immediately put away her Qinquan bag. She looked at Qin Feiyang with a cold smile and said, I know that you don't care for these few soul stones. After all, you have obtained quite a lot of benefits from Feng Zihan. Feng Zihan. Gain? Shangguan Qiu was taken aback. Looking at Qin Feiyang, his eyes lit up. Qin Feiyang glanced at Shangguan Qiu. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He took a step forward and arrived in front of Mu Qing. What are you doing? Mu Qing quickly. Qin Feiyang thought to himself, Didn't Mu Tianyang teach you what to say and what not to say? If anything happens to me, I promise that I'll drag you down with me. Qin Feiyang sneered. Then he turned around and laughed. Just kidding, just kidding. You guys continue. Fire Lotus, let's go. Okay. Fire Lotus nodded. The two left the VIP room one after another. This bastard, Mu Qing stared at Qin Feiyang's back. Her eyes were fierce, but at the same time she felt helpless. Although she was now a war god, she could not catch up with this person no matter how hard she tried. Just now, she did not even have the courage to resist. Shangguan Qiu looked at Mu Qing. Then he waved his hand and closed the door. Brother Mu, you said that Jiang Haotian gained a lot from Feng Zihan? Did he have a private deal with Feng Zihan, so he let Feng Wenhai go? I don't know. Ask him yourself. I have something to do. Goodbye. After Mu Qing finished speaking, she activated an altar and left without looking back. When the altar disappeared, Shangguan Qiu's eyes lit up. He turned and walked quickly out. Then he entered the VIP room where Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus were. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus sat at the tea table and looked at Shangguan Qiu with a smile. Shangguan Qiu closed the door and raised his eyebrows. Are you here to take revenge on me? Qin Feiyang was taken aback and said gloomily, Do I look like such a petty person? Very much so. Shangguan Qiu snorted. Tell me, what are you doing here? Qin Feiyang smiled. I'm here to ask, when are you going to cooperate with me? Cooperate with you? You can also refine the 9 transformation dragon blood elixir? Shangguan Qiu asked. Of course. I can do anything that Mu Tianyang can do. Qin Feiyang nodded. What's the relationship between you two? Sometimes they look like friends, and sometimes they look like enemies who have no contact with each other. Shangguan Qiu frowned. Does this have anything to do with our cooperation? Qin Feiyang asked. Shangguan Qiu felt helpless. Why are these people so difficult to deal with? How about this? I'll be at a disadvantage. If you cooperate with me, you'll get 10% less than Mu Tianyang. Qin Feiyang said. Impossible. The treasure pavilion is very trustworthy. Since I've decided to cooperate with Mu Tianyang, I'll keep working with him. Shangguan Qiu refused decisively. Are you sure? Qin Feiyang asked. Shangguan Qiu said lightly, If there's nothing else, please leave. Sigh. Why are you so stubborn? Think about it. You have nothing to do with Mu Tianyang, but I'm different. Your sister and I are partners now. That means we're on the same side. I really don't know what you're thinking when you don't want to cooperate with your own people. Qin Feiyang said helplessly. My sister is my sister and I am me. Please don't confuse us. Besides, what kind of friend are you? You're just a pawn. Shangguan Qiu sneered. Shangguan Qiu, be careful. Fire Lotus stood up suddenly and stared at Shangguan Qiu, her eyes flashing coldly. Shangguan Qiu glanced at Fire Lotus indifferently and did not take it to heart. Pawn, Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. He stood up and patted Fire Lotus's shoulder gently. He smiled and said, Girl, don't be angry. After all, she's telling the truth. We're just pawns. Brother, are you stupid? Can't you tell that she's humiliating you? Fire Lotus stomped her feet angrily. It's okay. I'm thick-skinned. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. He looked at Shangguan Qiu and said, Since you've said so, I won't force you. Now, please take me to see the deputy pavilion leader. See the deputy pavilion leader? Shangguan Qiu was stunned. He raised his eyebrows and said, It's useless even if you see him because he's no longer involved in the treasure-seeking pavilion. That's not necessarily true. Qin Feiyang said, Don't think too highly of yourself. Even the big shots in Ninth Heaven Palace have to make an appointment in advance to see the deputy pavilion leader. And you're just an ordinary outer disciple. What right do you have to see the deputy pavilion leader? Shangguan Qiu sneered. Qin Feiyang said, This is very important to the deputy pavilion leader. If you stop him, I'm afraid you'll have to pay a heavy price in the future. Is that so? Shangguan Qiu sneered. Believe me, if this matter is delayed because of you, I'm afraid even your master can't protect you. Qin Feiyang said lightly. Seeing Qin Feiyang's serious look, Shangguan Qiu couldn't help but frown. Actually, there's no harm in telling you a little. What I'm going to tell you is related to the first elder's son. Qin Feiyang said. What? Shangguan Qiu's eyes trembled. The first elder's son. How could he be related to such a person? Qin Feiyang said with a smile, Don't worry. Think about it carefully. I'll wait. He was silent for a long time. Shangguan Qiu said in a low voice, Wait a moment. I'll go and inform him first. Go ahead. Qin Feiyang smiled. Shangguan Qiu immediately turned around and hurried out. After watching Shangguan Qiu leave, Fire Lotus turned to Qin Feiyang and said in surprise, Qin Dage, are you thinking of... Although the first elder's son's death has nothing to do with the deputy pavilion leader, the first elder killed his way into the treasure hall because of this matter. I think the deputy pavilion leader won't be able to let it go. Now, when I tell him that I know the truth, how do you think he'll react? Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Fire Lotus said, Of course he'll find the real culprit and prove his innocence. Yes, this is something we can use. Qin Feiyang nodded. Hua Lian came to a sudden realization. She sized up Qin Feiyang and sent a sound transmission. You seem to have a well-thought-out plan. Did you already plan this when you learned the truth from Guillaume? You can say that. After all, the situation is getting worse. On one hand, we have to deal with Feng Yuan. On the other hand, we have to be careful of Shangguan Fenglan and the First Elder. And this deputy pavilion leader is not only in a high position, but also very powerful. If we can stand with him, it will be of great help to us. Qin Feiyang sighed. That's true. Fire Lotus nodded. About half an hour passed. Shangguan Qiu finally returned. He stood at the door and bowed. Please come in. As he finished speaking, a white-haired old man limped into the VIP room with a cane. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus exchanged a look and hurriedly got up. Shangguan Qiu entered the VIP room and looked at Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus. This is the deputy pavilion leader of the treasure hall. Greetings, senior. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus bowed. No need to be so polite. Sit down and talk. The deputy pavilion leader smiled hoarsely. His old face looked very kind. Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus returned to their seats. The deputy pavilion leader walked to the side of the tea table and put down his cane. Then, with Shang Guanqiu's help, he slowly sat opposite Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang glanced at the deputy pavilion leader's lame leg and said suspiciously, "Senior, your leg. Jiang Haoqian, don't be rude." Shang Guanqiu immediately shouted, "It's okay." The deputy pavilion leader waved his hand at Shang Guanqiu and smiled. The deputy pavilion leader of the treasure hall is actually a lame man. It's normal for you to be surprised. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, "Senior, I didn't mean to offend you. Please forgive me." "It's okay. Let's get down to business." The deputy pavilion leader smiled. This, Qin Feiyang looked at Shang Guanqiu. Shang Guanqiu frowned. He was obviously afraid of being overheard by her. The deputy pavilion leader could tell. He smiled hoarsely and said, "Miss Qiu, you can leave first." "Sir, this..." Shang Guanqiu was a little worried. The deputy pavilion leader smiled and said, "Although I'm a lame man, I still have my cultivation. With this young man's strength, he can't hurt me." "All right." Shang Guanqiu nodded. Before she left, she glared at Qin Feiyang fiercely. The deputy pavilion leader waved his hand gently and the door slowly closed. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and smiled. "Young man, can you tell me now?" Chapter 2044. Qin Feiyang glanced at the door and said with a smile, "Senior, it's better to set up a barrier." "So cautious?" The vice pavilion master was surprised. Qin Feiyang said, "This is a serious matter. I have to be cautious." "Okay." The vice pavilion master looked at Qin Feiyang deeply, then waved his hand and a barrier appeared. Outside, Shang Guanqiu was unhappy. He wanted to eavesdrop, but it turned out that he was guarding against a thief. Inside the barrier, Fire Lotus sat aside obediently. Qin Feiyang took out the jade of Qinghai and tea leaves and said with a smile, "Girl, help us make tea." "Okay." Fire Lotus nodded with a smile, got up and squatted aside and began to get busy. The vice pavilion master looked at the mask on Fire Lotus's face curiously. Why was she wearing a mask? "Senior," Qin Feiyang said. The vice pavilion master immediately came back to his senses and looked at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang asked, "More than 10,000 years ago, a level 9 soul vein was born in the Sky Dragon Sea, right?" "Yes." "This soul vein is currently in my treasure pavilion." The vice pavilion master nodded. "Senior, you are so domineering." Back then, all the major forces swarmed over, including the former palace master of the Nine Heavens Palace, who is also the son of the Great Elder. "Senior, you were able to suppress all the heroes and snatch the soul vein. Such heaven-defying means. I really admire you." Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and smiled. The vice pavilion master smiled and said, "After all, I was young and full of vigor, but now I'm old and can't be compared to back then." "Senior, you are too humble. However, although you obtained the soul vein, there were a lot of troubles later on," Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, the vice pavilion master touched his lame leg, and a trace of hostility flashed in his eyes, but he hid it well. Even Qin Feiyang did not notice. However, his subconscious action of touching his lame leg caught Qin Feiyang's attention. Qin Feiyang could not help but speculate. Could it be that this lame leg had something to do with what happened back then? The deputy pavilion master smiled and said, "Little friend, let's not beat around the bush and get straight to the point." "All right." Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "All those years ago, the Grand Elder's son was heavily injured by you, and he was attacked by sea beasts on the way, causing him to lose his life in the Heavenly Dragon Sea. Senior, you probably haven't forgotten this matter, right?" The vice pavilion master remained silent for a while. Then he sighed. "This old man wants to forget, but I just can't. You must have noticed this leg of mine, right?" Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. I'm all ears. The Vice Pavilion Master patted his crippled leg and smiled. This leg was caused by your Nine Heavens Palace's great elder. What? Qin Feiyang's expression suddenly changed. Fire Lotus was also surprised. Back then, the first elder killed his way into the treasure pavilion. Although the pavilion master stopped him and saved his old life, in the end, he paid the price of one of his legs. The vice pavilion master sighed. Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously, with Senior's cultivation, even if it's shattered, it can be reborn. But why is it crippled? It's a type of poison. The first elder personally concocted it. No pill, not even a deity detoxification pill, can remove it. The Vice Pavilion Master said. The first elder knows how to concoct poison? Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus were both surprised. You've just entered the Nine Heavens Palace, so it's normal that you don't know the methods of your first elder. He's actually an expert in using poison. In the entire northern region, if he says he's second, no one would dare to say they're first. And the poison he concocted, apart from himself, no one can remove it. This old man was poisoned with a type of poison called bone-corroding spirit thread. This type of poison, just like its name, is hard to disperse. Once it enters the body, it will fuse with all the bones in the body. It can't be refined or dispelled. Others think that this old man has been cultivating in seclusion all these years, but in reality, this old man has been suppressing this poison. Because if I don't suppress it, this poison won't just corrode this thigh, it will corrode all the bones in my body. The Vice Pavilion Master sighed deeply, looking a little lonely. Bone-corroding spirit thread, Qin Feiyang mumbled, feeling a chill down his spine. He never thought that the first elder would have such a terrifying side to him. Brother, the tea is ready. Fire Lotus poured 2 cups of tea, pushing 1 cup in front of Qin Feiyang and the other in front of the Vice Pavilion Master. Thank you. Miss, I don't know if it's an illusion, but why do I feel that your temperament is a little familiar? The Vice Pavilion Master looked at Fire Lotus suspiciously. Is that so? Fire Lotus seemed a little flustered, but Qin Feiyang was surprised and asked, Senior, you know Fire Lotus? No, I don't. The Vice Pavilion Master shook his head and looked at Fire Lotus. Miss, why don't you take off your mask and let this old man take a look? This, Fire Lotus hesitated for a moment and waved it off with a smile. Forget it. I won't cause trouble for you guys. You guys continue. Qin Feiyang said, Fire Lotus, let this senior take a look. He's experienced and knowledgeable. Perhaps he might know you. That's not good. What if he's up to no good? Fire Lotus muttered to herself. That's true. You can't judge a book by its cover. Qin Feiyang mumbled and looked at the Vice Pavilion Master with a smile. Senior, please have some tea. The Vice Pavilion Master did not insist. He picked up the teacup and sniffed it. Then he tasted the tea and praised, not bad. These tea leaves should have been cultivated in a herb farm, right? Qin Feiyang said, Seems like you're also a person of the way of tea, Senior. To be honest, I like to drink tea when I'm free. Actually, I have such tea leaves too. Perhaps they're even better than this. The Vice Pavilion Master laughed hoarsely. Is that so? Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. Ha ha! Seems like I've met a kindred spirit this time. Looking at Qin Feiyang's greedy look, the Vice Pavilion Master could not help but laugh. Qin Feiyang smiled awkwardly and said, Let's get down to business. Actually, there's something else behind the death of the great elder son. Something else? The Vice Pavilion Master was slightly taken aback. He immediately put down the teacup and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Qin Feiyang said, The great elder son was not attacked by sea beasts. Then what is it? The Vice Pavilion Master suddenly rose to his feet. His slightly cloudy eyes instantly became extremely spirited. There was even a terrifying sharpness in them. It's Feng Yuan. He secretly killed the great elder's son. He also killed all the people who came with him, Qin Feiyang said. What? The vice pavilion master was stunned. Qin Feiyang did not speak again. While drinking tea, he patiently waited for the vice pavilion master to calm down, because no one would be able to calm down when they suddenly heard such news. Feng Yuan, why would it be him? Why would he do this? The vice pavilion master murmured. His old face was full of disbelief. After a long time, the vice pavilion master finally calmed down and slowly returned to his seat. He looked up at Qin Feiyang and frowned slightly. Qin Feiyang said, Senior, are you thinking that I have a grudge against Feng Yuan? So I fabricated such a rumor and asked you to help me deal with him? In other words, I'm borrowing a knife to kill him. You even know what I'm thinking. Little friend, your insight is really amazing. The vice pavilion master laughed. Senior, you flatter me. If it were me, I would think the same, so it's not difficult to guess. Qin Feiyang said. The vice pavilion master said with a smile, Then, little friend, please show me strong evidence. Qin Feiyang asked, Does Guillaume count? Guillaume? The vice pavilion master frowned. Guillaume is Feng Yuan's confidant, but now he's under my control. I learned this from him. Qin Feiyang said. Yes. There is such a person. I heard that this time you were able to fight back against Feng Wenhai because of him. The vice pavilion master nodded in realization and asked, Then does he have solid evidence in his hands? No solid evidence. But I peeked into Guillaume's inner thoughts, and he didn't lie at all. Qin Feiyang said. No solid evidence. The vice pavilion master pondered for a moment and shook his head. Little friend, if you say that there's no solid evidence, it's just your one-sided story. How do you expect me to believe you? I know that these words alone can't make you believe me, but I can help you look for evidence. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Help me look for evidence? The vice pavilion master was stunned and said with a smile, Little friend, if I may offend you, I don't think you're such a kind person. Of course. Who would be so free to meddle in other people's business? Moreover, the target this time is Feng Yuan, and it has something to do with the first elder. Qin Feiyang said. Quite direct. Then tell me your conditions. The vice pavilion master smiled and seemed to admire Qin Feiyang's straightforward character. First, I hope that you can help me at critical moments in the future. Second, cancel the cooperation with Mu Tianyang and let Shangguan Qiu work with me. Third, the deal between me and Shangguan Qiu must be in soul stones. These are the conditions of this junior. Qin Feiyang said. This, the vice pavilion master hesitated. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, I believe that these three conditions are not difficult for you. The second and third conditions are not difficult either. I know a little about the cooperation between Little Qiu and Mu Tianyang. Since you've made such a request, it means that you also have the 9 Chu Yellow Dragon Pill and the 9 Transformation Dragon Blood Pill. So it doesn't matter who I work with. But the first condition is a little difficult for me. You know that I have a grudge with the first elder. If I help you, the first elder will be unhappy. I don't care. After all, he won't dare to do anything to me now. But you're different. You're a disciple of the 9th Heaven Palace. If he wants to make things difficult for you, you'll have a hard time in the 9th Heaven Palace. The vice pavilion master said. To be honest, I'm already having a hard time in the 9th Heaven Palace. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to you. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. What do you mean? The vice pavilion master looked at him curiously. This, on the contrary, Qin Feiyang hesitated. He kept the jade box as though he had received a treasure. He bowed and said, Thank you, elder. As the saying goes, A sword befits a hero. This tea is the same. Only those who understand tea, love tea, and cherish tea are worthy of good tea leaves, the deputy pavilion master said with a smile. Obviously, in this aspect alone, he liked Qin Feiyang very much. Elder, I really don't deserve your praise. I will definitely cherish it. Since the matter has been settled, I will take my leave first. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands and said, Fire Lotus, also put away the beauties of Qinghai. Take your leave? The deputy pavilion master was slightly taken aback. He asked suspiciously, Aren't you going to talk about the cooperation with Miss Chiu? Of course, we will talk about it, but now is not the time. Qin Feiyang said with a playful smile. You little brat. The deputy pavilion master shook his head and said with a smile, Well, you young people can deal with your own affairs. I only have one request. Don't make things too difficult for her. I won't. Don't worry. Then I will take my leave first, Qin Feiyang said. Take care. The deputy pavilion master nodded. Qin Feiyang immediately opened an altar and left with Fire Lotus. What an interesting young man. The deputy pavilion master shook his head and smiled. Then he lowered his head and muttered to himself. Was this matter really related to Feng Yuan? On the stairway to heaven, Qin Feiyang and Fire Lotus walked side by side. Not only did the negotiation end smoothly, but I also got a box of good tea. This trip was not in vain. Qin Feiyang was full of smiles. Look at how happy you are. I don't believe that the tea leaves he gave can be compared with a divine artifact. Fire Lotus pursed her lips. You don't understand. Even if you give me a peak-level divine artifact, I won't exchange these tea leaves. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Is it that exaggerated? Fire Lotus was stunned. It's not exaggerated at all. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Anyway, I don't understand. Fire Lotus shook her head and suddenly frowned. Looking at Qin Feiyang, she said, Brother, I suddenly thought of something. You go back first. What is it? Qin Feiyang stopped and looked at Fire Lotus suspiciously. It's a private matter. Don't worry about it. Hua Lian giggled and ran down without looking back. This girl. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and quickly disappeared into the Ninth Heaven Palace. Treasure Pavilion. VIP room. The deputy pavilion master was still sitting alone at the tea table, his brows knitted together. Swish! Suddenly, a figure appeared. It was Fire Lotus. The deputy pavilion master looked up at Fire Lotus and asked suspiciously, Little girl, is there anything else? Little girl, Fire Lotus lowered her head and murmured. She suddenly looked up at the deputy pavilion master. Her cold eyes emitted a great sense of oppression. Little girl, what do you mean? The deputy pavilion master was shocked. Fire Lotus did not answer. She slowly took off her mask. What? Looking at Fire Lotus's face, the deputy pavilion master's face suddenly changed. He exclaimed, How could it be you? Fire Lotus put on her mask again and said, If you know it's me, then you should know that Jiang Haoqian did not lie to you. The deputy pavilion master looked at Fire Lotus in a daze. After a long time he came to his senses and said, May I ask, who is Jiang Haoqian? That's not a question you should ask. You just need to know that you will do whatever he says. Fire Lotus said coldly. Okay. The deputy pavilion master nodded. By the way, warn Shangguan Qiu not to take advantage of me. It won't do her any good. Also, don't tell anyone about my appearance. After saying that, Fire Lotus immediately opened the altar and turned to leave. The deputy pavilion master hurriedly got up to see her off. After the altar disappeared, he returned to his seat, and his entire body sank into a sense of powerlessness. I didn't expect it to be her. Who on earth is this Jiang Haoqian? Why is she protecting him by his side? At this moment, The deputy pavilion master had too many questions in his mind. "Girl Chiu, come in." Suddenly, he shouted. The door opened. Shangguan Chiu walked in and asked suspiciously, "Have they all left?" "Yes." The deputy pavilion master nodded. He picked up his walking stick and stood up. He looked at Shangguan Chiu and said in a low voice, "Terminate the cooperation with Mu Tianyang immediately." "What?" "Sir, the cooperation has been agreed upon long ago. How can we terminate it?" "Won't this damage the reputation of the treasure pavilion?" Shangguan Chiu said hurriedly. "That's not important. After terminating the cooperation with Mu Tianyang, go find Jiang Haoqian personally. You must make him agree to cooperate with the treasure pavilion." The deputy pavilion master said. This, Shangguan Chiu was completely dumbfounded. "Also, whatever Jiang Haoqian needs in the future, you must satisfy him unconditionally." "Girl Chiu, I'm not joking with you this time. You must do as I say. Do you understand?" The deputy pavilion master said. "Yes." Shangguan Chiu nodded. He was a little dizzy. What was going on? Late that night, two uninvited guests barged into Qin Feiyang's cave abode angrily, but there was no one in the cave abode. One of them glanced at the cave abode and shouted, "Jiang Haoqian, I know you're in the castle. Get out." Swoosh! Qin Feiyang appeared out of thin air. He looked at the two people in front of him and said with a smile, "You two are in a good mood today. You actually have time to come here to play. Are you bored in the inner sect and want to experience life in the outer sect?" The two people were none other than Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing. "Stop pretending. Why did Shangguan Chiu terminate the cooperation with us? Don't tell me. It has nothing to do with you." Mu Qing said angrily. "So soon?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. He thought that the deputy pavilion master would think about it for a while. He did not expect that he would immediately terminate the cooperation with Mu Tianyang. Mu Qing pointed at Qin Feiyang angrily and looked at Mu Tianyang. "Master, did you see that? It's him." Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't point. Be careful, or I'll chop off your dog paw." Hearing that, Mu Qing instinctively shrank back. Mu Tianyang frowned and said, "Qin Feiyang, what do you mean?" "Do you still need to ask?" "Of course I'm taking revenge for that arrow." Qin Feiyang said. "Despicable." Mu Tianyang snorted coldly. "Weren't you despicable when you stopped the cooperation between me and Shangguan Chiu?" Qin Feiyang sneered. "Yes, I admit that we were in the wrong first, but you don't have to be so ruthless. My cooperation with Shangguan Chiu has just gotten on the right track, and you're doing this. Can't you wait for me to earn more soul stones?" Mu Tianyang frowned. "Sorry, I didn't think so much. But with our relationship, I don't think I need to be so considerate for you, right?" Qin Feiyang shrugged and said lightly, "After all, we're old friends. Do you have to be so ruthless?" Mu Tianyang seemed to admit defeat. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "You came to me just to say this?" Mu Tianyang struggled for a while and sighed. "Give me a way out." Qin Feiyang stared blankly and asked in astonishment, "Are you begging me?" "Yes, I'm begging you." Mu Tianyang nodded. Now that things had come to this, he could only compromise, because the treasure school was his only source of income now. Qin Feiyang laughed heartily and said, "This is truly unprecedented. You, Mu Tianyang, actually humbly came to beg me. I've already put down my pride. Don't be greedy. If you really piss me off, we'll fight to the death and die together." Mu Tianyang said in a low voice. "Don't be agitated, don't be agitated." Qin Feiyang quickly comforted him. Mu Tianyang really couldn't be pushed too hard. Otherwise, he would expose his identity in a rage. That would be bad. He pondered for a while. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang and said with a smile, "How about this? Let's make money amicably." Chapter 2046. Harmony breeds wealth. Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other. Mu Tianyang looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and asked, "How?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "In the future, we will split the soul stones we earn in the treasure hall equally. Are you so kind?" Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing were like discovering a new continent. This was too strange. When did he become so generous? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and said, "Of course not. I have conditions." "I knew it," Mu Qing muttered and asked, "What conditions?" "Help me deal with Feng Yuan. In addition, isn't the resource hall recruiting people this time? Let's go in together." Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang and said. Mu Qing's face changed and hurriedly said to Mu Tianyang, "Ancestor, you can't do that." Mu Tianyang frowned. Qin Feiyang's purpose was already very obvious. He wanted to drag him down completely. Qin Feiyang said, "I won't force you. Take your time to think about it." Ancestor, Mu Qing was burning with anxiety. If he really agreed to Qin Feiyang, it would be blatantly going against Feng Yuan. At that time, Feng Yuan would definitely not let them go. A moment passed. Mu Tianyang sighed and said, "You can't have both the bear's paw and the fish." "Okay, I promise you." "Haha, happy cooperation." Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand and laughed. Mu Tianyang rolled his eyes and said with a frown, "I'm a little puzzled." "Say it," Qin Feiyang said. "Before entering the Ninth Heaven Palace, I invited you to cooperate more than once, but you always had a dismissive attitude. So why do you propose cooperation now?" Mu Tianyang was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said helplessly, "Isn't it because I'm afraid that you will betray me in desperation?" "Don't I know you? Don't use such an excuse to fool me. If I'm not wrong, you should be in bigger trouble now. You can't deal with it alone, so you want to find someone to help you." Mu Tianyang sneered. Qin Feiyang was stunned. He shook his head and said with a smile, "No one knows me better than Brother Tianyang." "Is that true?" Mu Tianyang raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Who did you provoke this time? We're not outsiders, so there's no harm in telling you. The people we provoked this time are Shangguan Fenglan and the First Elder." Qin Feiyang sighed. "What? Shangguan the Elder? Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing looked at each other. When did this bastard provoke these two terrifying existences? "You don't know, they're the ones who want to deal with Feng Yuan, and I'm just a chess piece in their hands," Qin Feiyang said. "There's such a thing?" Mu Qing was surprised. Mu Tianyang said, "So when you didn't kill Feng when high in the square, it was equivalent to disobeying their wishes?" "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded. "Then it seems that, as I expected, you really have a private deal with Feng Zihan. And this deal is not a small amount, otherwise you wouldn't have taken such a big risk." Mu Tianyang said, "Yes." "For billion soul stones." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. "What?" Both of them were dumbfounded. They didn't expect it to be 4 billion. "Ancestor, we shouldn't have intervened in this matter. Although we haven't seen the elder, even Qin Feiyang, this bastard, is so afraid of him. You can imagine that his means are definitely not ordinary terrifying. If you offend him, you will definitely not have a good ending." Mu Qing said telepathically. Mu Tianyang was silent. "Both of you, I have told you these secrets truthfully. If you go back on your words at the last minute, don't blame me for being ruthless. As you said, at most, we will fight to the death and die together." Qin Feiyang looked at the two of them and said, "Fight to the death with us? Are you joking?" Mu Qing sneered. "Do you think I'm joking? Then why don't we give it a try?" Qin Feiyang's face was full of ridicule. Mu Qing frowned. With this person's means, such a small matter was really not difficult for him. Mu Tianyang pondered for a while, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "This time, you want to enter the resource hall. Is it also Shangguan Fenglan and the elder's idea?" Brother Tianyang, you are indeed a generation's emperor. You understand it immediately. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Mu Tianyang sighed and said, they let you enter the resource hall and fight to the death with Feng Yuan, while they benefit from behind. What a good method. Yes, look at how pitiful I am. Qin Feiyang said helplessly. Keep pretending. Do you think I don't know what you are thinking? Actually, you also want to go to the resource hall. Mu Tianyang snorted. Ancestor, the resource hall is like a dragon's pool and a tiger's den for him. Why does he still want to go in? Mu Qing was puzzled. Mu Tianyang said, because the vein of souls is in the resource hall. Mu Qing's eyes trembled, and she looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. You even dare to have ideas about the vein of souls. Do you want to die? Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Wealth comes from danger. Haha, it's getting more and more interesting. Okay, let's cooperate as usual. But I have a condition. If we really get the vein of souls, we have to share it equally. Mu Tianyang laughed and looked at Qin Feiyang. Crazy. Both of you are crazy. Mu Qing looked at the two of them. They were totally digging their own graves. No problem. Qin Feiyang nodded without hesitation. Then he glanced at Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang and said, You have to educate this descendant of yours. You are too timid. It's not your style at all. You are simply embarrassing yourself. You are too much. Mu Qing suddenly became angry. Am I? I'm just telling the truth. Qin Feiyang shrugged. Ahem. Mu Tianyang coughed and said, Mu Qing, regarding this, you really should learn from Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang said, see? Even your ancestors said so. What else do you have to say? Ancestor, Mu Qing had a stomach full of resentment, but because of Mu Tianyang, she dared not say it out. She could only keep it in her heart. Don't be unconvinced. You and Qin Feiyang are real peers, but look at Qin Feiyang. His words and actions are so steady and mature. Look at you. You are like a child. You are not at the same level at all. Mu Tianyang scolded mercilessly. Yes. I will work hard to improve myself. I will learn from him. Mu Qing nodded repeatedly. After being scolded by Mu Tianyang, she really felt a little ashamed. She felt that she was indeed very different from Qin Feiyang. It's good that you know your shortcomings. Mu Tianyang smiled with relief. Looking at Qin Feiyang, he stretched out his hand and said with a smile, Okay, I wish us a happy cooperation. Happy cooperation. Qin Feiyang also stretched out his hand and shook it tightly. Mu Qing looked at the two of them with a trace of a smile in her eyes. Once these two people reached an agreement, it was destined to set off a storm. Qin Feiyang let go of his hand and said with a smile, Since we have reached an agreement, let's divide the soul stones. Divide the soul stones? The two of them were stunned. Yes. Didn't you get more than 1,000,000 soul stones from the treasure house during the day? Qin Feiyang said. Mu Tianyang's face darkened. Even before the cooperation, Mu Qing also looked at Qin Feiyang with disdain. She had never seen such a shameless person. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang mockingly, saying, Sure, we can divide the 1,000,000 soul stones, but shouldn't you also take out the 4,000,000,000 soul stones you got from Feng Zihan and let us divide them? Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched. Her appetite was even bigger than his. Next, regarding the matter of dividing the soul stones, the three of them had a tacit understanding and did not mention it again. After secretly plotting for a while, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing stood up and left. After the two of them left, Fire Lotus also returned. Fire Lotus entered the cave and asked, Did I see wrongly just now? I think I saw Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing. No, it's them. Qin Feiyang laughed. What are they doing here? Fire Lotus was suspicious. Qin Feiyang briefly explained the situation. Ugh. Fire Lotus was stunned. Was he really planning to obtain the 9 Heavens Palace's soul vein? She asked. Are you sure you want to split it equally with him? Split it equally? How can we split it equally? Mu Tianyang also knows in his heart that it's impossible for me to split it equally with him. Of course, it's impossible for him to split it equally with me. When the time comes to snatch it, it'll all depend on our own abilities. But there are some things that only you know. There's no need to expose them. Qin Feiyong laughed. Fire Lotus heard this and was speechless. Are you tired of scheming against each other like this? It's tiring. But there's no other way. This is the way of the world today. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled, asking curiously, Where have you been all day? I was just bored, so I went around. Fire Lotus laughed. Qin Feiyong helplessly said, If you're bored, you can cultivate. Aren't you just wasting your time? Yes. I'll definitely work hard in the future. Right. When are we going to report to the inner sect? Fire Lotus asked. Qin Feiyong thought for a bit and said, Tomorrow morning. Help me inform Hui. Fire Lotus said, I've asked around. Actually, we don't need to stay in the inner sect. What do you mean? Qin Feiyong was startled and asked suspiciously. Fire Lotus said, We can be like Senior Brother Feng Zi and go to the inner sect to register, then continue to stay in the outer sect. There's such a thing. Qin Feiyong was surprised. Normal people definitely can't, but you're an exception. You're now a famous person in our 9 Heavens Palace. Who dares to force you? Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. You're teasing me too? Qin Feiyong helplessly glanced at Fire Lotus and said, Since we're already here, let's just take things as they come. Since we're going to the inner sect, then let's go. The next day, the sun slowly rose from the horizon. Early morning, Qin Feiyong also called Qin Rushwang out. After all, Qin Rushwang was now a disciple of the 9 Heavens Palace. It wouldn't be right if he didn't go there personally. After this period of seclusion, Qin Rushwang had also stepped into the advanced War God realm and was not far from the perfect War God realm. After tidying up, the 3 of them walked out of the cave. After Hua Yi came out, they flew towards the inner sect together. Brother Jiang, Sister Rushwang, your speed is a bit fast. How long has it been since you entered the 9 Heavens Palace? It seems like it's only been a little over a month. You actually broke through 2 small realms consecutively? Hua Yi noticed Qin Feiyong and Qin Rushwang's cultivation and was tongue-tied. Chapter 2047. Hearing Hui Yi's words, Qin Feiyong and Qin Rushwang looked at each other and realized that something was wrong. Their cultivation had indeed improved too quickly. In just a month, they had broken through 2 small realms. Even if they had enough soul stones, it was impossible. If this were to spread, it would definitely arouse suspicion. Qin Rushwang said telepathically, Why don't we hide our cultivation? I'm afraid it's too late now. Qin Feiyong mumbled. Yesterday, he had openly entered Sky Dragon City. His cultivation must have been exposed. Qin Rushwang frowned and said, If someone asks, how should we answer? This, Qin Feiyong was a little hesitant. Hua Yi asked, Brother Jiang, did you take some divine elixir? Divine elixir? Qin Feiyong was slightly stunned. He looked at Hua Yi speechlessly and said, Will you give it to me? I don't have such an elixir. Hua Yi laughed. That's right. How can there be such an elixir in this world? Now that things have come to this, I won't hide it from you. Actually, our cultivation has always been between perfect and advanced war god. Qin Feiyong said calmly. What do you mean? Hua Yi was stunned. What I mean is, we have always hidden our cultivation. As for the reason, it's naturally because we want to keep a low profile. Qin Feiyong smiled and said, now he could only think of this excuse. Is that so? Why don't I believe it? What? He looked at the two suspiciously. It's up to you to believe it or not, Qin Rishwang said coldly. Hua, he laughed dryly and turned to Fire Lotus. He asked, Sister Fire Lotus, don't tell me you're also hiding your cultivation. Guess. Fire Lotus smiled mockingly. How can I guess? Hua Yi was extremely helpless. Qin Feiyang glanced at Hua Yi and said with a smile, Brother Hua, don't be so surprised. Actually, you're also hiding your cultivation. Me? No. I am a true great success, war god. That's not right. After these days of seclusion, I've also broken through to the perfect war god realm. Hua Yi waved his hands. He released a bit of his aura. He really was a perfect war god. But Qin Feiyang and the others didn't believe that this was Hua Yi's true strength. After all, how could an existence that even the half-step divine Lord Black Dragon be afraid of be a simple character? During the conversation, the four of them passed through the square where the battlefield was, and a towering mountain gradually came into view. From afar, it was densely packed. They were even taller and more majestic than the giant peaks of the outer sect. They were like giant swords that could split the heavens, piercing through the clouds. That was the inner sect. The inner sect was the same as the outer sect. They were all immortals, caves carved out of the various huge peaks. However, in the center of the inner sect, there were two giant peaks that were about 1,000 feet tall. On top of each peak, there was a divine tower. The two divine pagodas both had 10 floors and were about 1,000 feet tall. They were like two kings standing in the air. Among them, the divine pagoda on the left seemed to be made of pure gold. It shone with golden light and was extremely eye-catching. The divine pagoda on the right emitted a dazzling purple gold light. What's that? Fire Lotus looked at the two divine pagodas curiously. You don't even know this? Hua Yi looked at the three of them in shock. Qin Feiyang and the others shook their heads. Oh my God! You've been in the Empyrean Palace for so long. Don't you know how to ask around? Hua Yi shook his head speechlessly. Qin Rishwang said, Do you think everyone is as free as you? Hua Yi smiled bitterly. The first thing one had to do after arriving at an unfamiliar place was to figure out the situation. This was human nature. How could it be called free? Those two ancient pagodas are called the Pure Gold Divine Pagoda and the Purple Gold Divine Pagoda. They are the cultivation grounds of the Earth ranking and Heaven ranking disciples. What Yi said, those on the Heaven ranking and Earth ranking receive such treatment? Fire Lotus was surprised. Of course. Those on the two rankings are the strongest among the disciples. The Empyrean Palace will definitely give them special treatment. What Yi said. What's special about them? Qin Feiyang and the others were curious. What Yi looked at the two pagodas with yearning in his eyes and said word by word, Time array! What? Time array! Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other. What? He looked at the three of them in surprise and said, You know about the time array too? I've heard a little about it. Qin Feiyang smiled. Amazing. I only learned about the time array after going to the Empyrean Palace and asking around. And you guys have heard about it before. You're not simple. What Yi said meaningfully. Qin Rishwang raised her eyebrows and said unhappily, Why are you talking nonsense? Can't you say something useful? Okay. Hua Yi nodded and looked at the Pure Gold Divine Pagoda. The Pure Gold Divine Pagoda is the cultivation ground of the Earth ranking disciples. There are 10 floors in total, and the law of time on each floor is different. Different? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Yes, the higher you go, the stronger the time array. On the first floor, 1 day is equivalent to 2 days. In other words, 1 day of cultivation on the first floor is equivalent to 2 days outside. On the second floor, 1 day is equivalent to 3 days. On the third floor, 1 day is equivalent to 4 days. On the fourth floor, 1 day is equivalent to 5 days. And so on. What he said. Not bad. Fire Lotus nodded. What he looked at Fire Lotus in astonishment. Such a heaven-defying time array was only considered not bad? Qin Feiyang asked, what about the purple gold divine pagoda where the heaven-ranking disciples are? The purple gold divine pagoda is naturally even more terrifying. On the first floor, 1 day is equivalent to 10 days. On the second floor, 1 day is equivalent to 20 days. On the third floor, 1 day is equivalent to 30 days. Counting in this order, 1 day on the 10th floor of the pure gold divine pagoda is equivalent to 100 days. In other words, 1 day of cultivation on the 10th floor is equivalent to more than 3 months outside. Don't you think the law of time is terrifying? What he said. Terrifying, terrifying. Qin Feiyang and the other two nodded. But in their hearts, they didn't think so. So what if 1 day was equivalent to 3 months? The law of time in the castle was 1 day equivalent to 1 year. It was a huge difference. Qin Feiyang instantly lost interest. In the eyes of the other disciples, these 2 divine pagodas were cultivation, holy lands that they yearned for even in their dreams. But in his eyes, it didn't have any meaning at all. He looked at the purple gold divine pagoda and said with fascination, I really hope that 1 day I can become an earth-ranking disciple and enter the 10th floor. No, if I can enter the first floor, I will be satisfied. There will be a chance. Qin Feiyang patted Hua Yi's shoulder and said with a smile, It's difficult. Hua Yi shook his head and sighed. Do you know how to become an earth-ranking and heaven-ranking disciple? Qin Feiyang shook his head. I guess that you don't know anything. Hua He rolled his eyes at him and explained, these 2 rankings are for the 10 strongest war gods and the 10 strongest divine lords. Qin Feiyang was stunned and said, so the earth ranking is for war gods and the heaven ranking is for divine lords? That's right. Hua Yi nodded. Isn't that simple? Let's not talk about the heaven ranking. Let's talk about the earth ranking. With your strength, you can easily get the first place on the earth ranking. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, How can it be that simple? Think about it. Just the outer sect disciples alone are more than 8 million. If you include the inner sect disciples, there will be more than 10 million people. To be able to suppress so many people and enter the earth ranking, which one of them is a simple person. As for the heaven ranking, don't even think about it. Everyone on the heaven ranking is a perfect divine lord. They can kill me 1,000 times over with just a flick of their finger. He shook his head. That's true. Qin Feiyang nodded. In that case, the first place on the heaven ranking, Feng Zihan, was also a perfect divine lord. A perfect divine lord was indeed a terrifying existence. Fire Lotus said with a smile, Then go to the earth, ranking first. I believe that with your strength, it won't be a problem. Will it really not be a problem? He asked. You must have confidence in yourself. Fire Lotus said. All right. I'll give it a try when I break through to perfect divine lord. He gritted his teeth and nodded. I have 2 questions. First, the earth ranking is for war gods. In other words, only war gods can enter the earth ranking. Then, what will happen to the disciples on the earth ranking after they break through to divine lord? Will they continue to dominate the earth ranking? Or will they be removed from the earth ranking? Second question, the heaven ranking is for divine lords. Then, how will the disciples on the earth ranking be arranged when they break through to a higher realm? Qin Rushuang looked at Hua Yi and asked suspiciously, First question, as long as a disciple breaks through to divine lord, no, a half-step divine lord, they must immediately leave the earth ranking and return to the status of a normal disciple. Because the earth ranking exists to encourage the disciples of war gods to work hard in their cultivation. Therefore, it can't be occupied by one person forever. Of course, in the past, there were many people who kept their cultivation at perfect divine lord and didn't break through to the earth ranking just to receive more soul stones. After all, the lowest amount of soul stones a disciple of the earth ranking receives every month is 10,000. To them, it's a considerable amount of income. As for the disciples of the heaven ranking, once they break through to divine lord and break through to a higher realm, they will enter a mysterious place. This place is called the Heavenly Palace. What Yi said. Heavenly Palace? Qin Feiyang and the other two were stunned. What was this place? It's said that the Heavenly Palace is directly managed by the Palace Master and the Vice Palace Master. But I heard that the Heavenly Palace isn't in Jiutian Palace. Hua Yi frowned. Not in Jiutian Palace? Qin Feiyang was surprised and asked, Then where is the Heavenly Palace? I didn't find out. It seems that the Heavenly Palace is a secret in Jiutian Palace. Hua Yi shook his head. Heavenly Palace, Qin Feiyang mumbled. Only disciples above Divine Lord could enter. This kind of mysterious place really made people curious. We're here. Hua Yi raised his head and looked ahead. His gaze locked onto a sword peak not far away, and he smiled. Qin Feiyang and the other two looked over and saw a large hall on top of the sword peak. On top of the hall, there were 3 big words. Intersect Duty Hall. Hua Yi suddenly transmitted his voice. You guys have to be careful. His tone was very serious. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang and the other two were suspicious. This intersect elder is called Jin Yunchang. He is Jin Fatso's father and Feng Yuan's son-in-law. What Yi thought? Feng Yuan's son-in-law. Enemies are really bound to meet on a narrow road. Qin Feiyang mumbled. Chapter 2048. Deacon's Hall. Basically, no one came here. This was because the inner sect disciples would go directly to the resource hall to collect soul stones. If there were any disputes, they would basically go to the battlefield to resolve them. Therefore, the inner sect Deacon's Hall was considered the quietest place. Inside the hall, a middle-aged man in a golden robe was lying on a chair, humming a tune while drinking tea. He was extremely satisfied. This person was Jin Yunchang. Qin Feiyang and the other 3 walked to the door, looked at Jin Yunchang and cupped their hands. Greetings, Elder Jin, we are here to report. Jin Yunchang was stunned, opened his eyes, looked at Qin Feiyang and the other 3, and an imperceptible cold light flashed in his eyes. Immediately after, he got up and walked to the desk and said indifferently, Come in. Qin Feiyang and the other 3 entered the hall one after another. Qin Rushwang said, This person doesn't look like Jin Fatso. This Jin Yunchang had a thin figure, and he looked gentle and refined. Jin Fatso, on the other hand, was fat all over. Hua Yi secretly laughed. You haven't seen Jin Fatso's mother. What do you mean? Qin Rushwang was suspicious. Hua Yi said, Jin Fatso takes after his mother's appearance. It can't be. Qin Feiyang and the other 2 looked at each other. Why do you think this Jin Yunchang likes Feng Yuan's daughter? It's all because he wants to rely on Feng Yuan. Hua Yi sneered. I see. If there's a chance, I really want to see how outstanding Jin Fatso's mother is. Fire Lotus secretly thought. When the 4 of them walked to the desk, Jin Yunchang said, Jiang Haotian, Jiang Rushwang, Jiang Fire Lotus Huirite. Yes. The 4 of them nodded. Wasn't this asking the obvious? As Feng Yuan's son-in-law, how could he not know them? Jin Yunchang said, Give me your original identity token. Qin Feiyang and the other 3 took out their tokens and handed them to Jin Yunchang. Jin Yunchang glanced at them one by one, then waved his hand, and the 4 tokens shattered. Following closely, then he took out 4 black identity medallions from his Cosmos ring and branded their names on them. Then he handed the medallions to Qin Feiyang and the other 3. From now on, you are all inner sect disciples. You must abide by the rules of the inner sect. The rules of the inner sect are similar to those of the outer sect. The only difference is that without permission, no one is allowed to enter the crimson gold divine tower and the purple gold divine tower. Jin Yunchang said, "Disciple understands." The 4 of them nodded. Jin Yunchang said, "As for your cave residences, I have already arranged them. They will be in the 1st and 4th cave residences of the 1st sacred mountain, 1st sacred peak." He raised his eyebrows imperceptibly and said, "Elder Jean, with the cultivation of the 4 of us, it doesn't seem suitable for us to go to the 1st sacred peak. Although your cultivation bases aren't that great, you're still influential figures of our 9 Heavens Palace. Naturally, we will give you a good cave abode. Of course, this is also something that my father-in-law personally instructed me to arrange. Consider it a bit of compensation and apology to you all." Jin Yunchang said. Yi smiled and said, "Then thank you, Elder and Hall Master Feng Yuan. No problem. You all can go." Jin Yunchang waved his hand and said, "Disciple will take his leave." Yi bowed and said. He gave a look to Qin Feiyang and the other 2 before turning around and quickly leaving the assignment hall. After the 4 of them left, Jin Yunchang's eyes flashed with a cold smile as he took out the image crystal. Buzz. Soon, Feng Yuan's shadow appeared. "Greetings, father-in-law." Jin Yunchang said respectfully. "What's the matter?" Feng Yuan asked. Jin Yunchang said, "Jiang Haoyan and the other 3 have already entered the inner sect." Feng Yuan's eyes were filled with killing intent as he asked, "What's the arrangement?" Jin Yunchang said respectfully, "According to your instructions, they will be arranged to the 1st sacred peak." "Well done." Feng Yuan nodded. "In addition, I also found out that Jiang Haoyan's cultivation is already a perfect war god." Jin Yunchang said in surprise, "What? Perfect war god? Are you sure you didn't see wrongly?" Feng Yuan was surprised. "No." Jin Yunchang shook his head. "How is this possible? Before entering the 9 Heavens Palace, he was only a low-level war god. It seems like only a month has passed? Although he got a lot of soul stones from us, how could he break through 2 small realms in a month?" Feng Yuan was in disbelief. Jin Yunchang shook his head and said, "This is also what I can't figure out." Feng Yuan said, "From now on, you have to keep an eye on him for this old man, understand?" "Understood." Jin Yunchang nodded. After hesitating for a moment, he said, respectfully, "Father-in-law, there's a small matter that I would like to ask for your help." Feng Yuan smiled and said, "We're all family. It's too polite to say that you're helping. Speak. Do you still remember Jin Zhou?" Jin Yunchang said, "Jin Zhou." Feng Yuan frowned, thought for a while, and said, "Are you talking about your cousin's son?" "Yes. This child also wants to enter the resource hall this time." Jin Yunchang said, "He's your nephew, so he's also our family. This is a good thing. What's his cultivation?" Feng Yuan asked. "Perfect war god." Jin Yunchang said, "The minimum requirement for the resource hall to recruit people is a perfect war god. His cultivation is enough. How about this? Just let him register at the resource hall. At that time, this old man will arrange for him to successfully pass the assessment." Feng Yuan said, "Thank you, father-in-law." Jin Yunchang said gratefully. Feng Yuan smiled, but for some reason he suddenly frowned. "What's wrong?" Jin Yunchang was suspicious. Feng Yuan said, "Do you think this Jiang Haoyan will also come to the resource hall to register?" Him. Impossible. You're the hall master of the resource hall. Isn't he courting death by going to the resource hall? I think he can't be so stupid. Jin Yunchang said. Not necessarily. What if he wants to get close to this old man? It seems that we have to be careful about this matter. Feng Yuan said. Father-in-law, he's just a mere disciple. Aren't you being too cautious? Jin Yunchang frowned. A mere disciple? Feng Yuan raised his eyebrows and said angrily, You dare to say this? Have you forgotten how Wen Hai fell into his hands? Jin Yunchang's expression changed and hurriedly said, I know my mistake. Please forgive me, father-in-law. Feng Yuan said in a deep voice, You can't be careless with this kid. Yes. Jin Yunchang nodded repeatedly, looking at Feng Yuan's gloomy face. He couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. Suddenly, his eyes turned and looked at Feng Yuan. How about this? You increase the difficulty of the registration. What do you mean? Feng Yuan was slightly stunned and looked at Jin Yunchang suspiciously. In the past, wasn't the minimum requirement for the resource hall to recruit perfect war god? Then now we might as well raise the minimum requirement to perfect war god. This way, even if Jiang Haotian has heaven-defying abilities, he won't be able to break through to perfect war god before the registration. Jin Yunchang said. Sure. Feng Yuan's eyes lit up and laughed. Let's do it this way. Isn't this Jiang Haotian and the others? Qin Feiyang and the other three were quickly discovered on their way to the first sacred peak. Junior brother Jiang, nice to meet you. You've already been approved to enter the inner sect? Actually, it's only right. You were originally first place in the assessment. If it wasn't for Feng Wen Hai framing you behind your backs, you would have been inner sect disciples long ago. The most infuriating thing is that the reward for first place has also been cancelled. I really pity you. Many people took the initiative to greet them. Qin Feiyang also smiled and replied to them one by one. Brother, your popularity now is no less than Feng Zihan's. Fire Lotus covered her mouth and laughed. Don't make fun of me. Didn't you hear what they said? They're completely sympathizing with me. That's not right. Not only are they sympathizing with me, they're also sympathizing with you guys. Qin Feiyang was helpless. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang looked at Hua Yi and transmitted his voice. Brother Hua, when you heard the name First Sacred Peak, your reaction seemed a little abnormal. We noticed it too. Fire Lotus and Qin Rushwang nodded. Hua Yi looked at the three and sighed. In addition to the Sword Peaks, the Crimson Gold Divine Tower, and the Purple Gold Divine Tower, there's another place which is the 10 Sacred Peaks. 10 Sacred Peaks? Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other and suspiciously looked at Hua Yi. The 10 Sacred Peaks are above the Sword Peaks. It is said that under each sacred peak, there is a level 5 spirit vein. Not only can the spirit vein give birth to spirit stones, the energy it emits is also of great help in condensing divine sense. Therefore, cultivating in the sacred peaks is twice the result with half the effort compared to the sword peaks. Hua Yi said, This is a good thing. Fire Lotus said, Yes, this Feng Yuan really has a conscience. He actually gave us such a good place. Qin Rushwang also laughed, but Qin Feiyang did not speak. He lowered his head and pondered. Good thing? Hua Yi was stunned and shook his head. Not necessarily. What do you mean? Qin Rushwang and Fire Lotus were puzzled. The disciples of the 10 sacred peaks are all perfect, Sir Gods. Their strength is extremely terrifying. Moreover, they are all candidates for the heaven role. Hua Yi said, So strong? Fire Lotus was stunned and then said, But does this have anything to do with us? Of course it does. These people are all geniuses. Do you think they will allow war god level disciples like us to enter the sacred peaks? Moreover, the cave residences that Feng Yuan has arranged for us are cave residences number 1 and 4 in the first sacred peak. The first sacred peak is the strongest among the 10 sacred peaks. And the people in cave residences number 1 to 4 are basically terrifying existences that can shake the heaven roll disciples. Now we have taken over their cave residences. Will they be convinced? Of course they won't. I bet that when we step into the first sacred peak later, there will be people coming to find trouble with us. Hui sighed and was worried. So, Feng Yuan seems to be helping us, but he is actually harming us? Fire Lotus frowned. Yes, his goal is very simple. He wants us to become the public enemy of the 10 sacred peaks' disciples. Hui said, even now he is still scheming against us. It seems that the previous lesson was not enough. Fire Lotus snorted coldly, her eyes full of anger. Chapter 2049. Qin Rushuang turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, a perfect Sir God is not someone we can fight against now. We have to think of a way in advance. Yes, Brother Jiang. We can't take this lightly. If we don't solve it immediately, there will be endless trouble later. He also looked at Qin Feiyang and said. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and his eyes flickered. After a while, Hui and the other two stopped at the same time and scanned the void in front of them. Their pupils contracted tightly. Qin Feiyang was so engrossed in his thoughts that he did not notice that Hui and the other two had stopped and continued to walk forward. Brother, Fire Lotus saw this and quickly pulled Qin Feiyang back. Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked at Fire Lotus suspiciously. What's wrong? What are you thinking so deeply about? Qin Rushuang frowned. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, I'm just thinking about how to solve your problems. Qin Rushuang stared at the void in front of them and said in a deep voice, there's no need to think about it. Trouble has already come. Already? Qin Feiyang was stunned and looked up. His face suddenly changed. There was a vast plain in front of them. On the plain, there were 10 towering peaks of about 10,000 feet. On the top of each peak, there was a tall stone tablet with a few bold words engraved on it. First sacred peak. Second sacred peak. Third sacred peak. Fourth sacred peak, that's right. This was where the 10 sacred peaks were located. It was only a few dozen miles away from the crimson gold divine tower and the purple gold divine tower. At this moment, whether it was the plain below the top of the 10 sacred peaks or in front of each cave residence, there were people there. Without exception, they were all looking up at Qin Feiyang and the other three. They are indeed very strong, Qin Feiyang muttered. There were men and women among these people. Everyone's aura was unfathomable. Everyone's temperament was also outstanding. Brother Jiang, why don't we go to Shangguan Fenglan? Hui transmitted his voice. This battle formation was too terrifying. He didn't even dare to move. It's useless to look for her. At most, it can only intimidate these people temporarily. Qin Feiyang thought. Indeed, treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Qin Rushuang nodded. Then what should we do? Looking at their formation, it won't be easy for them to settle this matter today. Hui was quite anxious. No rush, no rush. Qin Feiyang smiled inwardly and whispered a few words into Fire Lotus's ear. Fire Lotus's eyes lit up when she heard this. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Come back quickly." "All right." Fire Lotus nodded, then turned around and flew away like a bolt of lightning. What? He looked at Fire Lotus's back and suspiciously asked, "What did you tell Fire Lotus to do?" "You'll know soon enough." Qin Feiyang smiled mysteriously. "Hello, junior brother Jiang." In the blink of an eye, a young man in white stepped forward and cupped his hands at Qin Feiyang, looking gentle and polite. "Hello, senior brother. Qin Feiyang cupped his hands in return. The young man in white smiled and said, "Last time on the battlefield, junior brother Jiang, Shi Tai, and Feng Wenhai became famous in one battle. I admire you. You're too kind. I'm still far from being comparable to you, senior brothers and sisters." Qin Feiyang hurriedly waved his hands. "Junior brother Jiang is really humble. But junior brother Jiang, did you come to the wrong place? This is the 10 Great Saint Peaks, not the Sword Peak," the young man in white said. "They're here." Qin Rishuang and Hu Yi's hearts skipped a beat. They were just being polite before, and now they were getting to the point. "Is there?" Qin Feiyang was stunned. After thinking about it, he looked at the young man in white and said, "It seems that Elder Jean arranged for us to come to the Saint Peak." The young man in white asked, then junior brother Jiang, "Do you know what kind of place the Saint Peak is?" "I've heard a little about it. Everyone here is a candidate for the heaven role. They're all famous. It's our honor to be able to live under the same roof with everyone and cultivate together." Qin Feiyang smiled. "I didn't expect junior brother Jiang to be such a flatterer. It's no wonder that he could make such a name for himself in 9 Heavens Palace in just over a month. Even we heaven role candidates are ashamed of ourselves." Several young men and women laughed. However, their words were full of ridicule. Qin Feiyang naturally understood, so he didn't get angry. He smiled and said, "Senior brothers and sisters, you all have honorable statuses and powerful strength. We have just arrived here, so of course we have to curry favor with you." "Haha, that's good to hear. Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, you didn't flatter Jean Yunchang like this in exchange for cave abodes number 1 and number 4, right? Why don't you teach us? Although our strength is indeed very strong compared to Junior Marshal Brother Jiang's bootlicking skills, we really can't compare." As soon as those words were said, everyone here roared with laughter. The sarcasm on their faces was also undisguised. "You're getting more and more outrageous." Looking at those ugly faces, Qin Rishuang and Hua Yi's faces darkened. However, Qin Feiyang's expression did not change. He smiled and said, "You flatter me. If you really want to learn how to flatter, I will teach you with all my strength." "Haha, teach with all your strength? Can't you tell that we're mocking him? It seems that this person is just a flatterer." Everyone laughed nonstop. The young man in white also smiled brightly and said, "Senior brother Jiang, do you like our welcome ceremony?" "Senior brothers and sisters, thank you for your thoughtfulness. The few of us really like it." Qin Feiyang nodded. The young man in white said, "It's good that you like it. We were afraid that we would make you angry. After all, your reputation is rising now, and we can't afford to offend you. You're too kind. Compared to all of you, I'm still far behind." Qin Feiyang shook his head again and again. "Junior brother Jiang is humble. We have already prepared the first cave dwelling for junior brother Jiang. Now, we invite junior brother Jiang to stay. Of course, there is also junior brother Hui and junior sister Jiang Rishuang." The young man in white said with a smile and retreated to the side. The others also retreated one after another, making a path. Hui hurriedly transmitted his voice, "Brother Jiang, they are obviously provoking us. You can't go." "Why not?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and walked toward the first cave dwelling step by step. Hui and Jiang Rishuang looked at each other and could only helplessly follow. Soon, Qin Feiyang and the other two walked past the young man in white. "You still dare to go?" The young man in white raised his eyebrows. The others looked at Qin Feiyang and the other two, and the smiles on their faces gradually disappeared and were replaced by wisps of cold light. However, Qin Feiyang turned a blind eye to this. His face was also calm. However, Qin Rishuang and Hua Yi were very nervous at this moment. They were deeply afraid that the people on both sides would suddenly attack them. At the same time, They also admired Qin Feiyang's courage. In the face of so many perfect Sir Gods, he could still act as if nothing had happened. What a terrifying state of mind. Swoosh! Just as they were about to enter the first sacred peak, the young man in white suddenly took a step forward and stood in front of the three of them. Qin Feiyang was stunned and stopped in his tracks. He looked at the young man in white and said with a smile, "Senior brother, is there a welcoming ceremony?" The young man in white was stunned. Was this person stupid? Didn't he see that everyone's faces had changed? However, in the next moment, he felt that something was wrong, because he vaguely caught a trace of mockery in Qin Feiyang's smile. This person had been pretending to be stupid all this time? What an interesting scene. I thought that the disciples of the 10 sacred peaks should be a group of great people, but I didn't expect them to be a group of clowns. Qin Feiyang chuckled and no longer concealed it. There was no need to, because calculating the time, Fire Lotus should be back. What? Did he say that we're clowns? Is he borrowing courage from the heavens? He was obviously playing with us before. Pretending to be stupid? Preposterous! How dare he play with the disciples of the 10 sacred peaks, like monkeys? The group of people was immediately furious. Monkeys? Are you worthy? Qin Feiyang smiled disdainfully. The young man in white's eyes turned cold, and he said gloomily, "Jiang Haoqian, I dare you to say that again." The others also looked at him angrily. Qin Feiyang pursed his lips and looked around. Finally, he looked at the young man in white and said with a smile, "Senior brother, do you know? The others are a bit like monkeys, but you are especially like a dog because you bark the loudest." "How dare you?" The young man in white was enraged, and his aura surged. "Senior brother, have you forgotten the rules of the 9 Heavens Palace? Disciples are not allowed to fight in private? Or are you saying that as a disciple of the sacred peaks, you can ignore this rule?" Qin Feiyang said with a smile. The young man in white clenched his fists. This was obviously a trap. If he dared to say that the disciples of the sacred peaks could ignore these rules, then the people of the disciplinary hall would come knocking on his door. How sinister! He held back his anger and stared at Qin Feiyang. He said in a deep voice, "I challenge you now. Go to the battlefield immediately." Challenge? Senior brother, is there something wrong with your brain? A perfect Sir God actually issued a challenge to a perfect War God. Amazing, really amazing. Such shameless behavior. I'm about to prostrate myself in admiration. Qin Feiyang gave him a thumbs up and said with admiration. Hearing this, the young man in white's face turned green and red. However, no one stood up for the young man in white. They all fell silent. A few simple words were enough to humiliate the other party. This person was indeed difficult to deal with. Looks like we've underestimated him. 4 young men stood at the peak of the first sacred peak. They were tall and had good looks. The aura they exuded was more outstanding than the others. The one who spoke was one of them. He was wearing a golden robe and a golden crown. He was about 8 meters tall and had his hands behind his back. He looked like a king who had descended and exuded a terrifying aura. So what? He's just a perfect war god. Dealing with him is easier than killing a dog or a chicken. That's right. Since he dared to snatch our cave abodes, he must pay the price. The other 3 sneered. These 4 people were the original owners of cave abodes, number 1 and number 4. They were second only to the disciples on the heaven roll and had high prestige among the disciples of the 9 Heavens Palace. The disciples of the 10 sacred peaks basically followed their lead. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.